I'd like to call this meeting to order today, October 21st, 2014. Welcome, everyone. I'd like to take this opportunity to welcome you all to our regularly scheduled school board meeting on Tuesday, October 21st, 2014. If you wish to speak during the hearing of citizens, please pick up a card in the back of the room to my left, fill it out, and return it to Zoe Marshall to my left, and she'll get it to me so that I can call you forward at the appropriate time. You will be allotted 3 minutes to speak, and please note that respect for divergent viewpoints and civility will be shown at every board meeting. We do not reply or answer or comment on those speaking during the citizens' hearing. Please stand and salute the flag with me under the direction of Sarasota High School Color Guard and Sergeant First Class Frederick Pulpus. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Color guard, halt, right, base. Forward, march. Color guard, halt, right, base, post. Colors. Present arms. Order arms. Left face. Forward. March.
We are delighted to have Joe Gallagher with us today. Joe is a student at Suncoast Polytech High School.
That is correct.
And can you tell us something about what you're studying in school and what your plans are for the future?
Right now, over at Polytech, I'm a senior, and I'm taking a course in film over at SCTI. I plan on carrying that in my future to hopefully be a successful film writer, director, or producer.
Wonderful. I'd like to present you with a certificate of appreciation. Thank you for being here today. Zoe, get his name because we may need somebody to help us with the film, and we'll put your name at the top of the list, Joe.
Thank you.
We're all here today for a wonderful school board meeting. You'll notice to my right, a couple of seats over, that Frank Kovac is not with us live, but brought to us at great expense on the phone. Hi, Frank.
Hello.
And so we're happy that we're all here. We don't have any special presentations today. Mrs. White, do we have any superintendent's report?
No superintendent's report today.
Well, then we'll proceed to the hearing of citizens. I have two citizens to speak. First of all, I'd like to call Dan Lobeck forward. Mr. Lobeck, you know how to turn that button on till it's bright red, and you'll have 3 minutes right in front of your microphone. Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
And you'll have 3 minutes to speak. It will go amber. The green light will go amber in the last minute. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, honorable school board members. Here to speak about item 44 on your agenda, a one-year extension of the moratorium on the school impact fee. First, I would suggest to you that a decision of that magnitude should not occur without a public hearing. There is no public hearing set for that. I would suggest that be deferred until it can be. Second, this is to urge you not to take that action. I understand the developers and the builders have a lot of influence on the school board. They're extremely generous with their campaign contributions. But this decision should be made based on what's not good for your patrons in the development industry, but instead what's good for the school children and the taxpayers. You need this impact fee money. You need it for the next year. You shouldn't be considering repealing it, which is part of this proposal. It should go into effect in December as scheduled. You need that money. You now have it in your budget, in your capital improvement program over the next 4 years. It's scheduled to go into effect in December. You need it over the next 4 years to fund $2 million in site acquisitions and land purchases. It's already in your budget. You suspend the school impact fee for another year, you're not going to get that money. You've also decided to go forward with a Northport campus for the Technical Institute. You need that impact fee money for that. It's been suggested that the study is out of date because it was adopted in 2004. Well, in 2008, your consultant said that impact fee was only a third of what it should be, so it's not too much. The developers can't complain they're being charged too much because the impact fee is out of date. They're being charged too little. If you needed to update under the current methodology, that's legal under Florida law. I've studied your methodology. It relies upon local data where available. You just need to plug in new data. Your consultant could do that within 1 or 2 months. It's not that complex. I've studied that report. There's no justification in policy or in law. I'm an attorney, and I'm telling you, you can consult with your attorney if you need to. There's no compulsion under Florida law to suspend the impact fee for another year. It certainly doesn't make financial sense because you need that money. You've already budgeted it. So the question is, are you going to keep up with the demands of growth over this next year? Or are you going to let our schools suffer? Are you going to place the burdens of future growth on the backs of growth, on the backs of the developers that create the need for the additional school facilities? Or are you going to place it on the backs of the taxpaying public? This is a major decision, not to be done cursorily as it is in your agenda without a public hearing, and not to be done wrong, such as you have before you. Not certainly to be done for the developers who are generous with candidates for school board, but instead to be done based on what's right for the school children and what's right for the taxpayers of Sarasota County. Please vote no on number 44. Thank you.
Next we have Ken Marsh.
Good afternoon, board members, Mr. Gallagher, Mrs. White, Mr. Hardy. I'm here to speak on the same item, school impact fee number 44. I'm going to take a different tack than Mr. Loback did. First, I want to reject the contention that board members are swayed by developer contributions. As you all know, I'm running for the school board right now. Some of my largest donors are local developers, and they're supporting me despite what I'm about to say, because they understand that the best developments are going to attract families, and we need the best schools that we can have. So I don't really see that as an issue for me nor for you all. I'm disappointed that it's going to take another year to at least get an answer on what the school impact fee ought to be. I agree there needs to be another study, whether it's the 2,000 from 10 years ago or the 6,000 from 6 years ago. Another study is necessary. The county commission would require it anyway. But if we think back to the $26 million that new development has brought into the capital budget for the school board over the past 10 years, and where that $26 million has gone, mostly in Northport, but also the Polytechnic High School, and just understand the implications. If you all had not had that $26 million, what would have happened? We probably would not have been able to pay for Riverview High School $120 million of cash, probably would have impacted our creative financing for Booker High School, which was virtually without interest rate. our credit rating might be different than what it is right now. You all heard a growth management presentation this morning. We've gone from 1 or 2 corridors of development to 4 or 5. It's going to happen, and the longer we wait, whether that impact fee is $500 or $1,000 or $2,000 or whatever, it needs to be out there as soon as possible. What I would ask you all, however, is to speed the process up so that your September final budget adoption includes what it is you're going to be recommending, so that that second week of September meeting, you then have a credible revenue stream, and you know what you're going to be spending it on for the 2015-16 year and the 4 years out thereafter. We don't need to wait an entire year. Please get that done by next August. Thank you very much.
And last we have Mr. Richard Weingarten.
Good afternoon. I'm fully in support of the remarks just made by Mr. Lobeck and Mr. Marsh. As a taxpayer, I'm here, though, to ask for an explanation and for some accountability. Before the election of some of the members back some months ago, we asked for their views on these item 44. And we were told we couldn't really speak to that when I'm speaking of Chair Goodwin and Board Member Brown, because there was going to be a meeting of the board. We've heard no explanation since. We, as taxpayers, know that we pay and fully support almost annually now a $1 million additional tax to support the school system. We're happy to do it, but we'd like to know why it is necessary to help these poor developers. Are they really suffering as much as we taxpayers? We would like to have an explanation of how reducing the amount of the impact fees to where it has now been reduced helps us as taxpayers, helps the county of Sarasota develop. I think we're entitled to that before the vote, and if not, then afterward, the vote on this item 44. Once again, I support the prior statements, and I think it's time we restored the impact fees to where they belong. Thank you.
Thank you. There are no additions or corrections to the agenda. May I have a motion for approval of the consent agenda?
Move approval. Second.
Please vote. It worked. And we have the results, the vote results, 5 approve or 5 ayes, no opposition or nays. The result is the motion passes. We're making sure that this works because we've had some kludges in the past on voting electronically at a distance. Maybe it's the state of Georgia. I don't know. My home state, I might say. We have no items pulled for comment. We'll move on now to new business. May I have a motion for item number 41, please?
I move that we approve to advertise the new school board policy 4.117 regarding early high school graduation.
Second.
Could we have a brief explanation?
Yes. Could we have a brief explanation of this? Mrs. White.
Basically, this is to accommodate new changes in statute relative to options our graduates have, where they, if they achieve the 24 credits, actually there's an 18-hour option as well that's been modified from previous statute. So it's just to include that as part of our graduation requirement options.
Speaking in favor of this item, I believe it's important to have options for all of our students, and if they need to graduate early, to allow them to do that, but also make sure that our guidance counselors inform them and their families that there's a lot of advantages to staying in school until the rest of your class graduates, because while you're in school, you can get credits that will go towards your college education or training at SCTI that would go for career education. So while the law allows students to leave early, there's a lot of advantages for staying in school for the entire 4 years.
Any other discussion? Please vote. And the vote passes 5-0. May I have a motion for item number 42?
I move that we approve to advertise policy 4.10 regarding curriculum and policy 4.11 student progression plan that I believe goes in with the previous one to Florida law changes.
Second.
Any discussion? Some of these things are, the use of Florida standards wording and so forth. There's a lot of wording changes that we've had to do in recent times. Any other discussion? Yep. Please vote. And the votes are approval by 5-0. May I have a motion for item number 44, please?
43.
Oh, I'm
I would
sorry.
move that the school
43.
board approve the job description for coordinator, volunteer, and partnership program as presented.
Second.
Any discussion? Mrs. White, would you like to just briefly give us a summary of that?
This basically is a change in the qualifications for the PALS position, or supervising our volunteer programs, to ask that the person have teaching experience. We're finding more and more that that's very beneficial both for the training of volunteers and understanding appropriate programs for volunteers, and it really helps us when that person has the qualifications to understand how volunteers can most efficiently and effectively help our teachers.
Any other discussion? Please vote. And the motion passes 5-0. Now may I have a motion on item number 44, please?
I would move that the School Board of Sarasota County, Florida request the Sarasota Board of County Commissioners adopt an ordinance suspending collection of the educational system impact fees for all principal residential users where both an application for the corresponding building permit is submitted to or accepted by the county or municipality prior to December 14, 2015, and B, the certificate of occupancy is issued on or before December 14, 2016, unless negated by a future resolution of the school board and action by the Sarasota Board of County Commissioners. The educational system impact fees ordinance shall resume December 15, 2015, in its current form.
Second.
Discussion? Mrs. Ziegler?
Thank you. I just want to address, I know that there were many people who spoke of this today, but if you had the opportunity to take place in our workshop, I think that it was stated that there are a great number of differences that are occurring, especially with the notions of additional choices to our families. So I think it's imperative that we take a strong look at this, and that's why I do support the suspension.
Mrs. Brown?
I, too, am going to support the extension of our suspension so that we can do the study. As Ms. Ziegler said, we discussed this in our workshop this morning. That's as close to a public hearing as we get, and I know that you were there earlier this morning, Mr. Lobeck. But little offended, and maybe they were meant to be offensive, comments about that board members would vote for developers rather than the citizens. I was asked by a home builder, and I was asked by another organization representing the other side to sign something on how I felt about this issue. And I told both sides that I would not sign anything because, A, we didn't get all the information yet, and I do not believe that when somebody is asking me to either accept a contribution or their endorsement, that it's appropriate to ask me to sign something. And I find that appalling that that would even be asked. And I won't say any more about that. But the law has changed. In 2011, a change was made that said that we must include the local conditions that must be included in the study. I mean, that wasn't in the 2004 study. And so we have to do a new study. And the charter schools that we have now, we have 15% of our students attending charter schools, and how that applies to the student stations that we have available. I know some people don't even want to listen to that or understand the idea of that, but it's something that we have to live by. We have to live by what the laws are set out there. And this study is going to help us get to where we need to be. We put the year out there at the recommendation that it might take longer to do this or do that or get things ready to go to our county commissioners. Surely, as Mr. Marsh stated, it would be great if we could have that information ahead of time and maybe even include some of these numbers in our budget for next year. That would be ideal, and I think we would try to work for that. But I think to be on the conservative side, as we often are, give us that time, give us that room. And so that's what our staff asked us to do. And so I'm going to go along with what staff said and give them the year to get all the information together and come back with us, to us with all the information we need to make this decision and to set the rate if we are going to go forward with another rate.
Mrs. Zucker.
By setting this out till December 15, does it mean that we could not do it earlier if we had the report back in? Because I agree with what Mr. Marsh said.
If you had made a decision to change and to not extend it for the full year, yes, you could choose to go back to the county with a recommendation. So I think this gives you the full extent and gives everyone the thought that it might last an entire year. That does not prohibit the school board from making a decision earlier if you feel prepared to do so, and then can amend or could send a second resolution to the county commissioners.
Okay. Thank you. That's what I was looking for. Thank you.
Well, I, too, am going to vote for this. I believe the $26 million is a big amount of money. I think that we need to be thoughtful in making these decisions because the developers do pass these dollars on to people buying homes, and we know that. And I really and truly believe that we have to thoughtfully consider what our options are. If we can do this in 6 months as opposed to a year, I'm all for expediting or speeding this up as well. Mrs. Brown.
I have one question of our attorney. Is this a fee that is paid by the developers, or is this a fee that was paid by the homeowners at the close?
I think that can depend on the structure. I mean, I think many are paid by the developer up front, but who ultimately pays that fee is a matter of the contract between the home builder and the home buyer ultimately. I mean, I don't think there is an answer to that question.
I've been told by everyone that I've ever spoken to that it is passed on to the homeowner.
And I've been told that in some instances it's there in the closing documents.
Mm-hmm. And if it's not used for new classrooms or for new educational opportunities, it's not used for maintenance and other things in 5 years, it has to be returned. So that's the delimiter that we have. Any other questions? Please vote. And the motion carries 5 for approval, 0 for nay. May I now have a motion for item number 45?
I would move that the Sky Academy of Englewood charter application to the school board be approved.
Second? I second. Discussion? Mr. Kovach?
Yes, this has been a very difficult decision for me, but I'm going to support this charter. I believe that it has strong community support. I also believe that Englewood is a separate, distinct community from Venice, just as Venice is a distinct community from Northport. Currently, Englewood has no middle school to call their own, and I know there's been some concern about Englewood students from Charlotte County being drawn away from Charlotte County, but I think it's a situation where that will help Sky Academy with their seats. And again, main reason I'm supporting this is I believe that Englewood should have a middle school, and there's obviously not enough middle school students in that area to, certainly for us to support and build a middle school for them. So I'm going to support this motion.
Mrs. Zucker?
While I made the motion to support this academy, I'm also very disappointed in the academy that currently is run by Sky, and that it has a C rating. And I'm also not completely happy with the application as it was submitted to us, because 54% of the pieces in the curriculum are only partially met. I'm hoping that you do better and that you understand what it is that our staff was trying to tell you as to the need for clarity in the application and for a better handle on how you're going to deliver the services to our students, especially our ESE and ELL students. But I will support it. But I'll be looking to make sure that those changes are made.
Mrs. Ziegler?
I know that there was a lot of discussion in regards to Sky Academy, and I know coming off the heels of the Venice Sky Academy, I will say that coming off, speaking to what Mr. Kovach has said, that the community has spoken and has really expressed an interest and need, and I support that. So again, we do of course want to promote them having a high academic achievement, and we'll watch that. But I am in support of this charter.
Mrs. Brown?
I also find this a difficult vote. I remember sitting here not so long ago deciding whether or not we were going to keep Englewood Elementary open because we didn't have the numbers to support an elementary school. So now to say that we need a middle school in Englewood causes me some concern. I understand Englewood's a community, but it's a very small community. And some questions about the application, but overall it was pretty good. Two things, well, if we had this need for additional schools, that we didn't have enough space for the students we had, I think I might be a little more forgiving. But when the current Venice Sky Academy went from A to a C, I have a major concern with that. Not to say I wouldn't be looking at this, especially when population grows and you bring that C up to an A. I would probably look at this much more favorable. But I have that concern when right now we've got this agreement between Englewood for the elementary schools and Charlotte, that we send our middle school students to Charlotte often, or Venice, and they send some of their elementary students into Englewood, and we've got this agreement. But for every student that crosses those borders, it's the county that the child goes to school in that pays for it. And I have a concern about opening up a school that's going to draw I think the majority of its students would be coming from Charlotte. So I have a concern about that, and for those two reasons, really, I can't support it at this time.
Well, I'm the last to speak. I was concerned, and Ken and I have met, and Misha, and I've discussed this with numerous people in the community. But I am supporting this, but I am watching, and Ken knows that I am watching. I'm concerned with the current sky being a C, and I don't think you all are happy with that. And with the situation this year, many of our schools will be going down a grade, perhaps. So I'm particularly concerned that you've got the issues with the Venice campus, and now we're opening up an additional campus. So I just hope that our support will lead you to do great things. I'm not as concerned about students crossing county lines. I know we're looking at 60%. I like all kids to go to school in Sarasota County because I think it's the best school district in the state, and I've always worried about the students we send across the way because I think that, Charlotte County I love, but Charlotte County's a C district. So I really, that doesn't bother me a lot. I like the model being, fitness, and I'm a Y person, so I get the mission, and I get the understanding of middle school is just such a difficult time for so many youngsters. That's their gawky stage, and that's the time that we lose them. So as important as physical fitness is, academic fitness is even more important. So I want some assurances, and I'm hoping that the concern that I have with the English language learner and the special needs children and those things that fit into curriculum will be resolved, and that things will be going forward and in a much better light. And I know the board members that you all have are very engaged and very helpful to you, and I think that's great. So I am going to support, and I do look forward to great things from Sky Academy at both locations. Any other discussion? Please vote. And the vote passes. 4 aye, 1 nay. The item passes. And now we move on to announcements.
Oh,
Mrs. Zucker, would you
I have
please?
two things I'd like to talk about. One is the serving that we did in the cafeteria this last week. It was Food and Nutrition Week, and we had the opportunity to serve at several of our elementary and middle schools. And to watch those little kids come in, and to get their food and to see what they were eating, and the rapport that was built between the cafeteria worker and the student was amazing to see. It was just, I was glad to have done that because it gave me an opportunity again to look at our kids and enjoy them and enjoy the diversity that we have in our schools. So I found that very positive. And I served at Fruitville Elementary and Emma E. Booker. And Emma E. Booker was just darling. One of the little kids there said to me, "You look very pretty today." It's like I haven't seen them before. So they were just adorable. And the second thing I'd like to talk about is I would like to share with you a letter that we received from the National Council of Jewish Women. It says, to the board members of Sarasota County School Board, the National Council of Jewish Women, Sarasota Manatee Chapter, want to let you know how much we appreciate the fact that you changed the Friday night football games to Thursday because of the Jewish high holiday of Yom Kippur. This was most thoughtful and caring of you on behalf of the Jewish people in Sarasota. We thank you. Sincerely, the NCJW Corresponding Secretary. So we made a great impact by moving that one day, by moving the football game to one day sooner than later, and a good support system for our school system.
Any other discussion? I have a couple of things to add. One is that some of you may have seen an article in the paper that since 2009 we have saved $2.4 million with Florida Light and Power. That's the real deal. And during that time we have increased our square footage a great deal. And this is an amazing thing. So I want to thank Scott Limpy and his team who do an exceptional job. I would say probably a job better than most folks are able to do. We also have a $1.2 million grant that was awarded to 4 schools, 4 Title I schools, to increase their art, music, dance, drama, and interaction with academic courses in elementary schools, which is just a really great thing. And I wanted to just mention that our culinary arts at SCTI has their annual holiday pie sale. The deadline for that is November the 18th. It's wonderful. Please support SCTI. Order several pies or whatever that you can do, and it's really a marvelous program. So please do that. Our next board meeting will be in Northport, and it will be on the night of the 4th of November, which is election night, and it will be at Northport City Hall at 6:30 in the evening, and we are adjourned. Well, the word that I would use is shrill. Just shrill.
At least give them some help in group size to be able to save them some money, be able to make it more economical for them to be able to go out and get it. I mean, there's got to be some other way to do it than the way we're doing it.
Yeah. I know that health insurance is negotiated with our collective bargaining unit. However, my health insurance is with St. Leo University. We also have a collective bargaining unit. And St. Leo University went in with 10 other private universities in the state of Florida and formed a conglomerate. All of them have collective bargaining units. And so they were able to come to an agreement in order to provide the health insurance. I switched from the school board health insurance to their health insurance because it was a better policy for less money. So I say that because I don't know, I mean, we're not the only school district that's facing this issue. We can look north and south and east. And so while it is a bargaining issue, if we're all facing this bargaining issue together, I don't see why we can't begin to look at a greater pool and provide a different type of coverage and affordable coverage for our employees, because we're not the only ones facing this issue.
Carol, are they also able to provide better insurance for dependents and spouse and families? Is that also
yes,
part? Okay.
I'm still with the PPO Blue Cross Blue Shield. My insurance is more than it's employee and spouse, more than $200 a month less. Plus, I have a $100, $96 a month. I don't know what you call it. Sort of, I get this credit card thing that I can charge medical expenses on it.
Health savings.
Health savings, right? So that's $1,200 a year, and it's still with a PPO with Blue Cross Blue Shield. So that's why I bring this up to. I think that we need to explore the possibility of looking with some of our other districts to a different way of offering these services.
That's what I was just going to say. What is the Florida School Board Association doing, and why would they not be someone? I know, but I can't answer that this minute.
You're going next month, are you not? Both of you? Okay, maybe that's an issue of why we have not formed some kind of coalition to pursue health care options.
There's something in the back of my head that there is something with the Florida School Board Association.
I think they were looking for something for property insurance. I didn't hear anything about health insurance, but I did hear something about a property insurance one. I think that's probably what's nagging at you.
Mm-hmm. Do you know of any state statutes or anything why we couldn't do something like that? I mean, would you off the top of your...
There are no prohibitions that I'm aware of.
Okay. Sometimes there are, you know.
This challenge has been attempted many times with mixed success.
Well, maybe after January 20th we'll have
I still can't, I know I've asked this question before, but I'm still not sure of what happened when we were negotiating with the county and the cities and the hospital board for combined coverage for all entities, all government entities in Sarasota. And that was when I was on the board the last time.
Not much is coming.
Not much has come up, but it is a possibility. Okay, but is it a possibility?
It's easy to talk about. It's very hard to accomplish because you got to bring all parties to the table, which means doctors, hospitals, and what have you. And healthcare is what healthcare is. It's expensive.
And also, both entities have employee deductibles. They do. Neither entity provides health insurance for free for employees. Correct. So that was the big issue, is we wanted to continue to do that. And if I'm not mistaken, the original health insurance plan that they were with, the county is no longer with that group, if I'm correct.
Correct. It's
doesn't
gone through several levels.
Right. Yeah.
There was also something about the tail end of the plan, that if you came off the plan, there was a cutoff date. I'm fuzzy on some of those details, but there was something in the tail end that it wasn't beneficial. You might remember more than I do. But it was in some ways hurting our employees, not helping them, whatever that was in the tail end.
I would think any kind of consolidation would require us to make concessions on our side versus the county. But I mean, I know from the county's perspective.
That's usually the stumbling block, is because when you start to commingle experience, then those that have good experience are not too happy about mingling with someone with bad experience and vice versa. So it becomes interesting, and then you have to come up with common plan designs, which is a major hurdle to get over too. And given everybody's bargaining arrangements, that's, again, easier said than done.
I think it might be easier for school districts to come together than the county.
And that's why I carry that very same conversation as a conversation I have regarding technology.
But I think our employees are more like other school district employees than they are like county employees.
I agree.
Generally speaking,
yes.
that would be true.
I'll find out when I go
Could
up.
you, yes, when you go up in just a couple of weeks, if you both could inquire and see if there's anything.
I'll put it out online now.
Yeah. We'll put out an email.
We only want to talk to healthy school districts.
That's right.
Yeah, if they can help with our experience rating, that would be
That's
great.
right. That's exactly right.
See who's healthy.
Are we okay on that topic then? We're going to pursue.
Well, yes, and I think part of that same topic, because it ultimately shows up in our rates and in our premiums. I think we need to, as we talk about our operating budget over the next year, I think we're going to need to revisit this issue for other reasons on what we can do to reduce our insurance costs.
What is the buy-in limit on the community health purchasing, or the children's that other people can buy through the school district? Not through the school district, but I think their application is through. There's
Florida Kid Care?
Yes, the Kid Care. Is there what does that cost compared to what our policies are? I mean, maybe we ought to.
Are there income criteria?
Yes, there's income criteria.
But there's an income criteria, but at such and such an income, then you pay the whole premium. I mean, what would that premium? I don't know. Maybe we could look to see what the options would be for our employees to buy into Florida Kid Care.
Okay. Because this is like our morning session.
Oh, okay.
Right, I know. I did the same thing. I looked and I was like, and then I realized it was our morning session, and it's not till Deb comes up that we put us on TV.
So I didn't have to worry about food.
No.
We haven't been on TV yet.
No.
Yeah.
I was wondering why, but it didn't.
Oh, then we should have waited till TV for the veterans thing.
Well, we can do that again.
I'm sorry.
Now that Lori's practicing.
You jumped the gun. You thought I forgot. And since I'm a veteran.
Yeah, with all your buttons and flags.
You are a veteran.
And our other veterans out in the schools today, Mr. Lumpy and his desert fatigues and his
is he?
Yes,
is
and
he in
he's
his camo?
bringing K rations and showing students what people eat in the field. And
Who's doing that?
Scott Lumpy. Yeah, because he's a retired colonel, so from the Air Force. Was in charge of MacDill Air Force
Does
Base.
he have his hat on? It's awfully sunny today. I hate to have all that glare.
Ooh,
Sunscreen,
Shirley.
right?
Okay. Yes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Since we're not on camera,
we will be going on camera. So,
where are we on the employees' insurance data?
It's insurance data.
The public records request.
But we just don't have picture.
We're on.
I know.
Say it again.
I don't know. I think I got an email on it. And that's all right. I'll read my emails about the public records request.
Oh, I can give you an update on that. Yesterday, there had been a meeting of all the school board attorneys where some districts had chosen to respond with a letter giving them the individual who had requested, this was a public information request for a copy of our health insurance policy, which was easily done. And what is more difficult is basically directory information, name, address, gender, job title, work status, that type of information that would be given to this individual, which would include dependents that were covered under our health insurance and spouses. We've gone through a process for individuals to fully understand, our employees understand what are the exemption criteria. So if they are eligible for that, they are communicating that. But what has been suggested we do is send a response which gives a copy of our health insurance policy and the additional costs it would take, which is not a huge amount, probably in the neighborhood of about $500 of staff time and other costs associated with meeting this requirement. The feeling was that it's likely that this individual will not respond or not request it with a check because we won't start that process until we have the check in hand, given that multiplied over the many districts across the state of Florida. It may have been more of a statement he was trying to make rather than wishing to actually get this information. But that's kind of the current status.
I was just handed something that deals with a response to Paula Dockery from the AG's office, and they're basically telling the legislature to clarify the issue.
I spoke with staff this morning at a school and said sometimes these issues, good things happen. And I think it's brought up an issue that's concerning a lot of people around the state of Florida. I think the legislature will become more fully apprised of that and may perhaps make a decision to increase the number of exemptions for this type of information, particularly when it has the potential of being abused, since public information has been to have government out in the open, which is a positive thing. It wasn't to get mailing lists sold and to make money off of that directory information. So maybe perhaps one of the positives that have come out of this is a real look at this issue, and I think the legislature will be prepared to perhaps address it when they're in session.
Okay, can we move on to Goodwill, and then we'll take a mini break after that.
We can do that. If I could ask Deb Matheny to come forward.
She's running away.
As you recall, Don Roberts at Goodwill Academy had requested that he be allowed to address the board regarding the Goodwill Academy Charter School, and we've asked that be done at a workshop rather than a board meeting, and so they've been invited to attend today's workshop. So I'll hand it over to Deb.
Well, I'd just like to introduce to all of you, Reverend Don Roberts. If you have not met him, and I'm sure most of you have. He has been obviously a stalwart in the community for many, many years, so I think most of us have had long histories with Reverend Roberts. But most recently, the association has been as chair of the governing board for Goodwill Academy. And Goodwill Academy, as you know, was in existence for 2 years, did some remarkable things with students, and sadly decided that it was no longer able to financially support the organization and did close last July. So with sadness, we saw the wonderful principal, Darlene Zimmerman, leave the community, and we all are missing her tremendously. But in the meantime, I think Reverend Roberts and his board had some thoughts about their experiences as starting a charter school and some of the trials and tribulations that they went through that they'd like to share with us, and then also had presented some lessons learned that our staff was then able to look at and be able to comment upon some of the things that maybe we are either doing in the school district already or things that we are learning from some of the comments that Reverend Roberts had made. So without further ado, I'd let you go ahead and start some of the dialogue.
Before you go ahead, Deb, I'd like to very much commend Reverend Roberts for actually closing the school, because we have so many, we haven't had so many, but we have had charter schools in the past who year after year, losing funds, financial instability, refuse not only to face the inevitable, but are upset with the board when we say this is not fair to the students. You took on a student population that is extremely difficult. They were older young adults, and A, you were willing to try it, but B, very importantly, you were willing to say, this is not working the way we wanted it to work, and therefore we do not want to expend district funds unnecessarily, and we want to serve these children or these young adults in a way that's not being served by the school. So we thank you very much for being so accountable and so responsible with the school. We appreciate it.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to know who got the camera over there. It's really a bad place to have.
The only thing worse is from looking up. You just see all of that underneath. Yes.
And that is a lesson learned.
Indeed, another lesson learned. I really appreciate the opportunity to come, and on behalf of Janice Mee and Bob Morris and Rick Smith, fellow board members, and some of them may be joining us momentarily. We just wanted to welcome the opportunity to come back and thank you for that kind comment. It was a marvelous experience, a sad experience, a great experience, an expensive experience, and all those other kind of things. But we did wanted to at least share with you our perspective, so that you can at least from a charter school startup perspective, an operational perspective, at least get one person's or one group's point of view about what we experienced in that. And what you do with it is obviously up to you to do that. So I appreciate the opportunity to do that. I won't take a great deal of your time. And I'm assuming you've distributed this stuff to everybody?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So let me just kind of walk through at least, and again, this is the gospel according to Don. I'm not suggesting to you that this is the truth in any way. I'm just suggesting to you this is our experience with this student population, with our interaction with the system, etc., and wanted to just kind of give you that debrief and let you know what we experienced. The first one that we experienced in our startup was, as we understood the startup of charter schools and the federal dollars that flowed down this way, that we had understood that there would be a certain initial capitalization, which proved not to be true by about 50%. And in working with the consultant and studying other charter schools around Florida, we found that the Sarasota interpretation of the rules to be as stringent as any that we experienced out there, and we believe cost the school startup-wise a fairly significant capital. And I just suggest that maybe you want to review that and get some comparable data. I know your staff has gotten some response to that, gave you some comparative data in this part of the world. But I would encourage you to at least think that through the next time that a charter school comes up to you, and see if you are at least in the middle the middle percentages of how that all gets funded.
And can I, just for the board, we can operate in a couple of different ways. We can go through all of the lessons that are in this, and then show where we have already done some of that review and give that response to board, or we can do it as we come to each issue. So what's the pleasure of the board?
Yeah, I'd like to go issue by issue.
Yeah, because my memory doesn't last longer than that.
So I'm going to have, Mitzi did review that with other districts and has prepared a handout. And so if you just come forward, it mostly just to be there to answer any questions. I think there have been some changes we have made in response to the Goodwill experience. Certainly, we have found that even with some of the consultants or people that are out there, they're not always aware of all the rules. And anybody that's dealt with federal grants, they are very stringent in terms of being accountable for when you can start expending, so that you have to have that track within the grant period of time and not prior to, and even the organizations that you can fund to. These were misperceptions from the individual that was kind of leading Goodwill and they had been working with that caused some of the problems. So we have really strengthened our packet in giving to charter schools so they have a check in terms of what are the rules that everybody must follow, because if we accept and pay out dollars that then the federal dollar that they feel are not correct, then we lose the money, not the Goodwill. So we have to be very careful with that. We also did find that perhaps there was a better way rather than having actual receipts. So we were more stringent in that area and have made some minor modifications in terms of proof of expenditures. However, when we did compare with our neighboring districts, in some ways they were even more stringent than we are in terms of the payout they would allow initially. So I don't think we found, and Mitzi, correct me if I'm wrong, that we were out of line when we did review that. What we found, though, is we need to do a better job educating even consultants that feel like they have all the information they may not.
Right. It just needs to be a little bit more of a partnership, for the best way to utilize getting reimbursed your dollars for your grant.
So is it my understanding that Goodwill paid a consultant and then consultant was giving Goodwill information? I mean, many times we have that relationship directly with our charter schools, but we had a consultant that was being paid as a filter. Was that what I'm hearing?
I don't know.
Carol, my experience with it was the consultant had basically set up the parameters, but when we sat down with the staff to staff and said, here's our understanding and here's the rulings that came with what was permissible, what was not permissible in terms of the initial capitalization, et cetera, was substantially different than school districts that we'd experienced. Now, this is, again, historic. You remember that, right. These rules have evolved over time, as they should have. But, from the early on, there was much more flexibility, and those rules tightened as we all experienced. We understand that.
So then, if I'm correct, that our staff did review with Goodwill Academy what the rules were and that they were known going into the contract, because it's a two-part process, and I know that staff spends a lot of time with organizations prior to a contract coming before the board.
Right. That is exactly true, and I think if where it came down to was the interpretation of the rules as just as you live through it, and our experience with that, it was less substantial than other districts had given. That's just a blanket statement, and I just wanted to share that with the board, and that you all may want to consider. Obviously, this continues to evolve, how you interpret the rules and apply them.
But we communicated our interpretation.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure that we as a district communicated our interpretation, absolutely. So it's something that the Goodwill Academy was well aware of going into the contract.
No question.
Perfect, thank you.
No question. No question about that.
Thank you, Mitzi.
Mm-hmm. I also see on her response, and that may not be covered in just lesson one, but it might have been somewhere else, was that the numbers that you budgeted for, the number of students didn't materialize, and also the weighting factor was much different than what you had expected.
Correct. Yeah, in that sense, we take full responsibility of what we heard our consultants say in terms of the double FTE rates, depending on the severity of the students involved and some of that stuff. That's and our original business plan was built around that, and that simply did not materialize.
So I would say you have more problems with your consultant.
Shirley, there is no question about that.
Thank you.
That too loud, but there's no question about that. that.
Well, I don't think it's the first time that this board has shared those experiences with consultants, because following along with what Mrs. Brown says, I pulled your original application, and it did call, I mean, you do have 44 students starting in 05-06, going up to year 5, 66 students. So if you look at the Sarasota students, I believe 28 was the number that you had when you closed. So not only the weighted FTE, but the numbers of students were significantly lower than what you had projected as a charter school.
Correct. And what we found through that was in searching about that number was fairly unrealistic in terms of that population's readiness to move to that transitional kind of program that we had. So that was the nature of the case.
Well, I go to what Dr. Kleinlein said, and how much we appreciate, or this board member appreciates what you tried to do, and having served on a charter school board that was for students with disabilities, and there are other very well-respected and great organizations in this community with good hearts, but sometimes in that translation to the actual servicing of students and operating a school, there seem to be some disconnects, and it's not easy. And I'm sure that you've also spoken to some of your colleagues who have been down this path.
Yeah, exactly. In fact, we at Goodwill had really, as an organization, a statewide organization, had tried to lead the development of these kind of charter school programs for that particular population. And what we have determined is, as a state association, we've pulled back from all of that, because it just, the dynamics in the populations and the percentages and the dollars simply don't work over time. Because I think we ended up subsidizing the school about $250,000 in the 2 years. And, after a while, we just decided very honestly, and we'll talk about that at some point, that we can serve that population just as effectively without all of the charter process. And I'm not even sure academically we can't do exactly what we were able to do at that without all of the other structures that you all appropriately have to have in place. Item number.
See, that's the whole thing. We have structures and things that we have to have in place. You and I have had this discussion many times, and how much easier it is to not have to adhere to those structures.
No question about it.
I'm saying you're a renegade.
Yeah.
And we've actually thought of seceding from the state of Florida.
Yes,
so
we have.
you're in good company.
Well, we won't go there today. But
go ahead, Reverend Roberts.
Item number 2, compensated employment as an experiential learning encourages student participation and performance. I don't suppose it's any surprise to you to let you know that when you put a paycheck out there with folks, they tend to show up. And what we found was a significant number of students who had significant attendance problems, et cetera, rectified those problems overnight when you were able to put them next to a paycheck on a consistent kind of basis and put them into an adult environment with those kind of things. And all, I mean, I'm just kind of probably speaking what you already know, and that is other motivation factors other than the academic motivation factors are very helpful in keeping students there.
Who pays the salary?
We pay the salary.
Okay. Okay.
In fact, I'm going to ask Sonia because she can inform the public and the board about the programs that we do have available.
Yeah,
we have 2 of our board members here. I want to recognize Mr. Smith, and you know all these wonderful, nice folks here, and Mr. Morris, and let's see, is me here? I don't see her yet, but these nice folks are here, and I would welcome their participation in any way that they would choose to do, in any way that you would choose to have them participate.
Right now, since we are on a schedule, why don't we just go through this, and then if we have other questions, then we'll do that.
Kathy, before you leave that, I just want to say that I heard what you said about people coming to work because they're going to get paid, and I know a whole lot of employers that would disagree with you on that.
Yeah, that was kind of running through my head.
Just because you're paying them doesn't mean they're going to show up.
Well, no,
and just because they show up doesn't mean they're going to work.
Well, that is also true. Well, it really does take. It really takes not only the paycheck, but obviously an employer, at least in this instance, who's really committed beyond the employment dollar for those folks. Because trust me, even the dollars that we paid for them in the initial stages were not very productive dollars spent. But
so I'm going to ask Sonia just to speak to some of the programs so that the board knows about what we do have available in this for this recommendation.
Good afternoon, Sonia Figueredo Alberts, Executive Director
of
Is her mic
support
on?
services.
Is your mic on?
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, it is. Anyway, and you're absolutely right. Paychecks are used as a motivation factor, and we really are working very close with our student population in terms of balancing literacy as well as academics with work experiences. And in our school district, we have a array of opportunities for our students that are throughout our community and really developing those skills to become citizens and productive citizens in our community. We have over 49 partnerships in our community, and Goodwill Industries is one of our partners that we really thank them for every day participating and really allowing our students to have the opportunity not only to practice the skills learned in the classrooms, but also become employee citizens in the facilities that we have throughout the districts. We also have an expanded VIP sites, which is opportunities in our community to expand those skills, and then if the employer feels it's a fit for their business, they become employed and they receive a paychecks. We have stipend programs with Comcast, Habitat for Humanity, Mastery. We have 7 countywide job coaches will assist our students when they're placed in our community placements to really coach them throughout the experience, because we really want successes and we are receiving that, and families also have a choice of guiding this instruction. We have developed a conjunction with Manatee County Business Leadership Network, which I'm part of it, expanding those opportunities in the north, south, central part of Sarasota County. And we're also part of the community members for Suncoast Workforce and Partnerships. So we continue expanding opportunities for our ESC students so they can become, as they graduate from our school systems, employed in our community and successful in their employment abilities and opportunities if that's their choice for.
Thank you, sir.
Okay.
Super. Sure. Super. 3 statistics. Now, again, and I could go back and get you the data, I suppose, but really this is just, again, the gospel according to John, and it's an observation. A number of the students that we experienced, in my opinion, and I don't want to sound judgmental about this because I don't mean it in that sense, they had much stronger learning capacities than I think that had been attributed to them previously. I don't know how else to say that. And I would simply just encourage a regular review of the capacities of your students, particularly as they start to age out, et cetera. And I suppose it gets easier when they're 20 to go, well, they're there, and they'll move on out fairly quickly.
I have a master's degree in exceptional student education as well as a PhD, and I thought that by federal law since 1975 that we do have to do this on a yearly basis. If I'm mistaken, I'll certainly stand corrected.
And I think you absolutely do.
Sonia, okay. Can you kind of...
And all I'm suggesting to you is that your evaluations have been done, and probably very appropriately. So all I'm telling you what our experience was is that a number of those students, for example, the young man who learned to read in 90 days or whatever it was, and had not had that capacity prior to that, however we evaluated his particular progress, however we evaluate his capacity to learn, did not serve him as well as we might have.
I'm on my way to look at that data.
And you have to remember to your observation that as sometimes as students get older and whether they're bored or not, the absentee from high school classes is certainly a direct correlation to their not learning how to read or being there. Now you're paying them to show up, so all of a sudden there's a different incentive. Since we can't pay our students to come to school, that certainly impacts our ability to...
Yeah, and Madam Chair, I think if we got down to anything from this whole lessons learned, whatever we can do from a collaborative basis in this community to put these young adult students next to a paycheck as fast as we can and support them in that academic process makes all the sense in the world. And I think that's really what it ultimately comes down to.
When you have them in an academic setting and then also in a work setting, what was the mix? I mean, how many hours a day were they in an educational setting versus...
I started to say 4 and 4, but it was whatever the whatever the school day was by 50%.
Usually about 3 and 3.
3 and 3.
So
3 academics, 3 in the work experience program.
So they were only basically at desks or learning for 3 hours, and then the other 3 hours was spent working, at the Goodwill stores?
At the Goodwill location nearest the charter school there. So we just let, half the students would work in the morning, half the students would work in the evening, in the afternoons, and we would move them back and forth in terms of both their academics and their work experience programs.
I'd like to respond in terms of IDA and our regulations in terms of monitoring student progress. As you have said, yes, we do monitor on a yearly basis. We need to look at the IEP and look at the actual levels of performance and then align some goals and objectives that are going to continue meeting the needs of the students based on instructional and community-based practices. Along with that, by regulations, every 3 years we need to look at the reevaluation process, which is conducted. And also, the guidelines provide us at the age of 14 to begin developing a transition plan. And the transition plan allows us the guidance of instructing the students based on the needs, the actual levels of performance, and the access for post-secondary school education, whether it's community-based instruction, whether it's employment. So there are some systems in place right now that have allowed us to educate ourselves as well as educating the parents and the student in terms of the choices they have. And yes, we guide them. The job coaches help us tremendously align those needs and the choices they have, aligned with also inventory of their likes and dislikes, because when we're dealing with very involved students, we have to look at choices of likes that are going to be successful for their transition. So we are very involved in guiding that transition plan for them to be successful. So we're doing that.
Carol?
Yes, thank you. There were a number of lessons learned that dealt with academics. If I could just sort of address them, and what was the assessment instrument or instruments that you used at Goodwill to assess students' academic learning?
Carol, I would have to tell you I don't.
Okay.
I don't know that data. I don't have that data in front of me, and I can certainly get that from you.
And I asked the question. I truly don't remember how I voted on this. I mean, it's no secret that I vote yes and I vote no on charter schools. But as I went back to the application, the TABE, the Test of Adult Basic Skills, was the one that was in the application. It's an instrument that I'm familiar with because when I taught in the Hillsborough County Jail, it's an instrument that we used, and so that was a concern at the original application, which is why I asked if that was an instrument that was used according to. I'm not here. So again, I think as we begin to look at the lessons learned from a board member perspective, I think it's incredibly important that we are diligent in approving the applications and looking at some of the things such as the TABE that was in the application, which really isn't appropriate for the population that you were dealing with. So that's why I asked that general generic question, and without some of those answers, it's really hard for me to begin to evaluate the lesson learned in relationship to the application, in relationship to the student's IEP, in relationship to transitioning that student for him or her to reach his or her full potential.
I will confirm that information back to you, just so we all have that same information.
I would just add, too, just from an anecdotal perspective, some students that we observed at Goodwill Academy simply were excited about being in a new position, in a new location. And that was a phenomenon we'd oftentimes seen with an adult student, even though adult might have been a 17-year-old going from a high school into an adult ed program. There was some degree of enthusiasm and excitement about being in a new setting. And so given it over a time, it would have been really interesting to see how those learning gains continued over time.
And I think the point is that you see that same excitement when we transfer students and match them to their likes in our community, those partnerships we have, and then they see the end that they're going to be receiving payment after their skill and generalized employment. So you see that excitement when we see the partnerships, and I welcome to join me at any time and look at the different facilities that are really partnering and embracing the opportunity of diversity for our students. And like you said, it's just a motivation, but it's a different change of environment. They go to school in the morning, but we transition to the work side, and they become engaged in the process because they can do it, and we align them to the likes and dislikes of their environment. So,
and I think it's certainly anecdotal, but as you move from the environment that you've known since you were 5 to one that is perceived to be adult, I'm never really sure what is perceived. Clearly, there's a step up for those students as they enter into that world, and I mean, I would always fun to watch them expand into that new role, own sense of self-worth and self-actualization is amazing.
Well, and I think some of that goes to schools, and I remember sitting in school too thinking, why am I learning this? Why do I need to know that?
Right.
Of course, we didn't have, are you smarter than a fifth grader back then, that we might need to remember these. But they can see in real life why they need to know these things and how it's going to be applied. In our small learning communities, I think, are working towards that also, so that they can see how what they're learning is going to be applied to real life situations.
Now, I know we have to spend lots of time on Mrs. Matheny's performance, so give her all the
that's true.
accolades,
That was
Samantha.
number 4. I just wanted to certainly commend the staff. No one could have been more responsive. No one could have been more supportive of us continuing, and I kept asking her to write the check.
That's not her job.
I know.
She
And
writes them
I'm
to us.
talking about the philanthropy that we were all involved in writing a check. But I just wanted to thank the staff publicly for the kind of very professionalism that we've experienced with you, and I just didn't want this opportunity to go by without doing it.
Now, we appreciate Mrs. Matheny, and she has really been an incredible asset in this position. It was charter schools support was lumped in with other positions, and it was so hard for Mr. McGew to do so many things. So having, Deborah in this position is wonderful. So we agree.
Well,
Okay,
give her a
Mother.
raise or do something. Okay?
We all agree with that.
We're a collective bargaining unit, Reverend.
After you take care of health care, all right? All right. It was interesting to me that at least in the FCAT, and again, I'm not sure I understand everything I understand about the FCAT process, but the report from our teacher and from the staff was that our students were able to make similar gains in that environment to the general population, and I thought that was just an exceptional report. I'm not sure what I attribute it to, but certainly those students stepped up, stood up, did what they needed to do, and that certainly wasn't universal across the whole population, but certainly major gains for a number of those students, both academically, which was marvelous. Right? 6. Clearly, again, I think, Madam Chair, the point that I made earlier, I think the real issue that we want to communicate is to the extent that we can continue to work on partnership development with the school system, with the business community right now, who is not hiring, I can just tell you.
We know.
I think we're the only employer left in town that continues to hire folk. But clearly, whatever we can figure out how to do to integrate those students sooner than later into a vocational path that is experiential, the better off we're all going to be, I think, from a community standpoint. And unfortunately, because of the way that this particular population and the funding streams from this population, it just didn't make it possible for us to continue to doing that without substantial subsidy. And I want to thank the Able Trust. You all may or may not know the Able Trust helped us with our shortfall on funding. Then the second year, after we've closed, we went back to them and asked them to continue that funding so that we have staff now working with those students to make sure that we didn't abandon those students on the way out the door. And we've taken care of that. We're staffed appropriately to do that. I think we have 7 of those students now working for us and another few out someplace else, and others have made other choices. But we are certainly continuing to work with those students, and will continue to work with those students as long as it takes. So I just want you to know that.
And Reverend Roberts, you make an excellent point, and I do go back to the initial legislation in 1975, and it was the intent of the Congress at that time that Public Law 94-142 would be funded at about 40%. And I ask this question every year prior to Ms. Figueroa-Alberts being here, to Mr. McHugh, that the funding sometimes has dipped down the federal funding to 16%. I don't know what it is. 16, 1/6. So we're probably hovering about that right now, maybe 17. So, I mean, this truly is an issue, and as we begin to look at our students with disabilities and our state legislature working, and as a community working with those legislators who go to Washington, D.C., I mean, it's something that needs to be funded. It was promised over 35 years ago, and it's still not fully funded. So I think, you are certainly in a position to help the school district with that, because it does help all of our children.
Sure. And we are committed to that process. And I
know
and I have hopes that we're going to see some additional funding coming into the stream to make that happen. Last but not least, let me see. Again, I think it's just the comment of the need to develop collaborative approaches. I'm more than happy to work with the school system, particularly. I mean, clearly, you're going to have some of those students. They need to go to work today. We're hiring. If nobody's come to see us, have them come see us.
Oh, we are, and we have a number of students in the north, in the central corridor, and also in the south that are involved with Goodwill Industries in terms of work experience program. And I really want to thank you because it's one of the communities agencies that really partner with us and make this happen for our students. But I also want to assure you that we have some really wide diversity of partnerships in our community that are really opening the doors for all our students to have that work experience and really transition what they're learning in the classroom to an opportunity outside and be hired by those employers and be successful. And we also have job coaches that assist and guide and recoach and meet and balance the need for those students to be successful. We also have our high schools where we have transitional planners, because by law we are guided to provide different opportunities, and it starts at 14 just for like a general ed student. They have inventories to develop their likes. We also have to do it for all our ESC students. So we're committed, and I feel that we have a lot of great partnerships in this community that are willing to allow us for that to happen. And like you said at the beginning of your presentation, there are some structures and frameworks in place that guide us as a school district to advocate for this to happen for our students, and we're committed to do it. And I thank you for all your support too.
Glad to do that. Well, we've been working with people with disabilities for 100 years, and
you look very young for it.
I know. It used to be brown when I came to town.
He's got a picture of Dorian
and
Gray
a lot
in his attic.
skinnier, I might know. But I do want to thank the board for the opportunity. Clearly, you can never measure the impact on a human being in terms of dollars and cents when you're in the midst of that process and you're watching human beings blossom and grow and go and et cetera. And it's a marvelous kind of thing that can happen through partnership. My only regret is that the charter model, at least for that particular students and the ones that we served, didn't work as effectively as we had hoped. We simply wanted to come back to you and tell you we gave it our best shot. We subsidized it substantially. This wonderful board of directors worked with us, and it was the most difficult decision that the board of directors of Goodwill Industries ever faced, shutting this thing down, because our hearts were in it. And I just kept reminding all those who wanted it to continue to write the check, and we could continue it. But clearly there wasn't that level of a subsidy available out in the community to serve that fairly limited number of population. So
I would also like to thank the Goodwill Administration and Board for helping to articulate for our department some of the things that are most important for a new charter school. some of the things that we in the public school district just take for granted are foreign concepts in terms of organization and management. And some of the things I know Darlene would question, even though she'd been a public school teacher, in the role of an administrator, some of the paperwork and some of the things that we do were very confusing. And I thank you again for working with us and trying to clarify our role in trying to help.
Well, I just figured that without a dialogue, then you have a monologue.
Exactly right.
And monologues get you nowhere. We preachers know that.
Thank you. Thank you for coming before us.
Thank you.
Discussing this.
Well, and I very much appreciate it. I read every application, every contract, and I think that the lessons learned really help to guide us as we make those very difficult decisions. And those who come before us are not always happy with our decisions. I personally have been to Tallahassee more than once on an appeal, but I think that we use this information to make informed decisions, and all of those decisions are in the best interest of the students who we serve. The other thing that I have heard over the years really has to do with the consultants, and that was a cottage industry that grew and grew well. I've had very few charter schools who have come back to say that they were served well. And I will leave it at that.
There's got to be a business there somewhere for somebody who actually knows how the rules are and how they're applied. And we did not feel we were well served. And so between that meant none of us were well served in this whole process. Right. And what can I say?
Shirley?
You turn to the folks who say they know what they're doing.
You didn't actually.
While we have Deb Matheny here, I don't want to do one of those liberal media gotchas, but there was an article in the paper last week. Schools get paid to teach no-shows, and Deb was quoted, and one of our rejected schools was listed as the worst in it, and that was about charter schools getting paid even though the students don't always show up. And that's because charter schools in Florida are paid based on their enrollment, and if the students don't actually show up every day, they still get paid that. And sometimes even if they come back to our schools, the charter still gets the money. Whereas the public schools are paid and they are deducted for the days that the students aren't there. Milburn Academy was listed as one of the worst in the state, and we closed that school partially because 72% of the students missed at least 3 weeks of school. Mm-hmm. And again, that was for our strong oversight. Are we having any problems with any of the current charter schools? Or are they working? No. You're working closely with them to keep
their attendance is good, and I don't have any concerns about any of our charter schools. I think the article to which you referred is something that a news service was doing a national investigation of some of the charter schools that had a reputation for promising and not being able to deliver. And I think several of the charter schools mentioned really were dealing with a very, very hard-to-serve population, and maybe, again, had some lessons learned themselves, that it wasn't just opening the doors that created some kind of an environment for students. That you had to have more than just an open door. No, our charter schools are in very good shape.
Well, thank you, Don, for coming, and Sonia and Deborah, thank you for presenting. Thank you. The board's going to take a 5-minute recess before we go into budget.
Exactly.
And then they don't graduate. So that's what's worrisome for me. Maybe it's your
Would everybody reassemble?
You know, it's a good thing we're doing this now.
Now for the fun part of our meeting.
Eating cookies.
This is budget.
Much easier than this part.
Yes. Mrs. White, would you? I'm sorry, Caroline?
We're bringing to the board another budget reduction proposal. As you recall, at the last board meeting, we looked at what was projected with student enrollment, our projected revenues, and what the expenditures would be if we rolled forward staff in alignment with the projected enrollment. And as an organization that is 81% salary and benefits, even more than that when you add charter schools' salary and benefits, there are some very difficult decisions that the board is faced with given the revenue shortfall that we anticipate for 2009-2010. So our plan is to bring some budget reduction proposals at the board workshops, not making a final decision till you get all of the different proposals and can look across all possibilities, and probably look at finalizing some of those decisions in early January. And then we will also look at our appropriations or allocation staffing formulas for elementary, middle, high, and departments. We also have projected savings from this school year that we would like to apply to soften the 2009-2010 budget shortfall. Again, some of these are one-time funds, some of them are recurring, but you have a list that we gave in part of your packets that I will continue to add upon savings from this year. And with the way we're purchasing career technical supplies, we were able to add an additional revenue savings for the 2008-2009 that could be applied to 2009-10. So right now our savings in this year is about $770,000. We'll also be discussing any legislative flexibility that we're given in using our capital funds for general operating purposes. Certainly, the board will have a discussion about the capital budget and some of the shortfalls we're seeing there with some of the needs. So that will be a discussion further in December. So saying that, we've focused on one budget reduction proposal for this meeting, which is looking at high school scheduling. And just to kind of lay the framework, many years ago, when Booker High School and Venice High School moved to block scheduling, their budgets had to be supplemented because of the need for additional staff to be able to run that schedule. That's very typical across the state. A number of years later, it was decided that we would supplement all of our high schools in a similar manner, just so there'd be some equity in staffing dollars, even if they weren't on that block scheduling. So when we did move those other schools to block scheduling, we didn't have to increase it any more than necessary from the student enrollment because they had already been supplemented. But the block schedule does require more staff in order to implement. It certainly, in terms of the research, we know with achievement, the results are mixed. We know that block schedule has some benefits when you're looking at attendance and discipline because you're minimizing transitions. But this is certainly primarily a budget reduction discussion, because that you can run a schedule, the 6-period day or 7-period day, with fewer staff members required. And so it's one of the things we feel school districts across the state, and you're going to be getting some information regarding that, are reviewing that. Some have already moved in that direction. And so we're sharing this proposal with you to give you the facts in terms of our moving to an alternate schedule. So I'm going to give it to our Executive Director of Secondary Schools, Steve Cantese, to give you this presentation.
Okay. Good afternoon. The process we went through to gather some numbers for the board as far as the budget reduction for scheduling. I have formed a scheduling committee last year. Consists of about 20 individuals that represent all of our high schools, all 5 of our comprehensive high schools. And with the SLC design, working on purity, working on getting the career themes through some scheduling activities, it was necessary to form that group. To work on this project, I tapped a group that represented each of the high schools to work on a committee. We have met approximately 3 times. And we've done a lot of work outside of the committee. So they brought information back to me. I gathered the information. We put it together in a report for you to give you an idea of what we could possibly save if we looked at changing the type of schedule that we currently use in high school. The committee that I did form was a committee of 5 plus myself, Dr. Nelson directing, and it was a representation from each school. Each time that we had a meeting, they were to take the information back to the high school, talk to the principal. We didn't disseminate the information freely, but we did talk about it at the high schools with administration, and we even solicited some input from others at the same time. Okay, where I would like to start is in the packet that I provided you. It's the executive summary, the front page of the executive summary. It basically lays out what the cost savings would be for a 6-period day, and it lays it out for a 7-period schedule. When looking at the 6-period schedule, it's approximately $4 million savings. When you look at a 7-period schedule, it's approximately $5 million in savings. And when we look at that we have to take it into context that we will also incur some expenses. I made a note there that we will be required to purchase additional textbooks for both of these schedules due to the possible doubling of courses that teachers will teach. An example of that would be right now on the block schedule, a teacher would teach 3 out of 4 courses. Say in English 1 teacher would teach 3 English 1 courses. If we were to go to a 7-period day, the teacher would teach 6 courses. So you're actually doubling during a semester the number of students taught, but during the course of the year it would be the same, approximately 150 students.
Steve?
Yes, sir?
Does that mean, are the teachers, though, the high school teachers, are they still teaching the same number of minutes or hours, or however we calculate in a school day?
Actually, on both the 6 and 7-period day, they would have additional contact time with students. So that number would increase. The amount of time they'd be teaching during the day would increase the minutes. But it would be the same number of periods. So the face time, the contact time with actual students would be increased.
And that number would come from planning. Their planning
That is
time?
correct, yes. Yes, sir. The planning would be reduced from 90 minutes currently on the block schedule, 1 90-minute period, to approximately 59 on the 6th period and 50 on the 7th-period schedule.
So is this something that needs to be negotiated?
No, there is current planning time designated for both non-block and block schools. So this fits within the current contract for non-block schools. But there is a difference in the contract for planning period for block versus non-block.
And that traditional schedule is 55 minutes with the passing times of 10 minutes, 5 minutes on either side. We would be able to achieve that.
When Dr. Norris presented to us the additional 30 minutes, it was for instructional time. As I look at both these proposals, I'm just concerned now we have more time that children are passing during the day, and we know that it takes time for children to pass, to move from one class to another, and when they get in that class, it takes time to settle down and to begin the instructional time. So, I don't know, I mean, I know this is about money, but when I look at, the classroom and these cuts as far away from the classroom as possible, while I see that we may save $4 million or $5 million, I am concerned that it seems to me, while we may be taking time out of planning time, that we're going backwards with how we configure our day for instructional time.
The one thing to clarify in terms of instructional minutes, because it's true that you do have more in passing time with this type of schedule. However, the students are actually receiving more instructional minutes in a course. And that's required. I mean, they had to adjust in terms of what is defining a credit with the block schedule to 120 hours. This for a full credit gives 135 hours. So there is some making up in terms of that. And frankly, we could not, without the additional 30 minutes in the school schedule, we could not have the option of a 7-period day. We would only have the option. We couldn't meet the contractual requirement for planning time without the additional 30 minutes. That, when I asked superintendents at the last meeting, and it wasn't me asking, it was they were asking each other to show of hands, the most prevalent schedule that was currently represented is the 7-period day.
Again, I have sat on this board for a long time, and we've gone from a 7-period day to a 5-period day to a block schedule day. And I mean, and I know these are the best recommendations, and I appreciate Superintendent White you bringing them forward to us. But again, it's...
Well, I would have to ask the question then, because I hear what you're saying, but this is all hypothetical. But I would have to ask the question, if we did not go from a block schedule to a 7-period day, how many staff would we lose? How many staff would we need to eliminate in order to reach the goal of approximately saving $40 million?
And certainly, when you look at the eliminations with the current schedule, you have to realize with those core academic, we've staffed them currently. I mean, you'd make adjustment for reduction in student enrollment. So given that reduction is already built in. $39 million is already built in. That gap that we have already builds in a reduction of 71 staff because of declining enrollment. So that's already built in. But the staffing ratios that we use for our core academics would have to be maintained in order to maintain class size. And that's the majority of the courses that you teach at high school. The only place we could go, and that becomes the challenge, are in electives, non-core academic subjects. And we pretty much push the limit in terms of class size without reducing programs, because that's what we've tried to do, maintain our programs. That becomes the challenge in terms of having further reductions with our high schools that don't involve a change in schedule.
And I would also say that we are looking at this change in the schedule is a pretty drastic move. But we also I would say that if we're looking at ways to save money within the district, and if we choose to do it with scheduling, is one way that we choose to do it. And I know it would be an option that may be a last resort, but it may be one that we have to choose. I'm confident. I've worked in both types of schedules. I'm confident we can provide a high-quality program with either the 6 or 7-period day. The research that Lori mentioned before is inconclusive as far as student achievement goes, but there's certainly differences between the two schedules, and I think they're highlighted as we go through here, and I'll try to point some of those out, for your benefit. But we can, provide a high-quality program even in a 7-period day.
Shirley?
But,
I have 3 questions regarding the 7-period day. If we went to a 7-period day, would the students be there longer?
No.
That's the schedule they're on now. Is it basically a 7-period day?
The opening and closing school would stay the same.
Yes, we are for the 7-period day. Would it alleviate the problem that the student brought to us last Tuesday in that she couldn't get her language course if the difference between the 6-period and the 7-period?
The problem with, and there are going to be those kind of specialized situations that we already are making guidance counselors aware of, so students don't postpone. The problem with that is it has to be a sequence of a course, in other words, Spanish 1, Spanish 2, which predominantly is a full year course, and so in the block you can do that in one semester. So she could save both courses for her senior year and use a huge amount of time for that purpose in immersion in whatever the foreign language is. But there's an awareness out there right now that this is being considered, and that we're working with our students to make sure that they don't delay some of their coursework so that they can't have that sequence. So we're trying to minimize those problems. But no, this 7-period day, because it's a full year, these are all either half-credit courses go for a semester, full credit courses go for a full year. That would not solve that problem.
The third question would have been about transportations, but since we're not really changing the opening and closing
Shouldn't
time,
impact that.
I withdraw the third question.
And my question is impact on small learning communities. I noticed that was lightly touched on here. I'm very concerned about that. We've spent a lot of time building small learning communities. We've spent a lot of time establishing the research that was done to prove that these are important for the transition 8th, 9th grade. I'm very concerned.
And quite honestly, going into this process, that was part of the discussion that we had with this scheduling group. One of the challenges with the small learning community is is even in the block schedule or the 7-period day, one of the challenges would be the scheduling process. It is the opinion of the group that worked on this scheduling committee as well as others. You'll see some research in here that Dr. Nelson did with Hillsborough County. They saw some improvements in their small learning community, the alignment of their small learning communities. The problem that we would tend to have with the change in the small learning community would be the collaborative planning. Of course, it would drop at the high school level from 90 minutes to 50 minutes, 55 minutes, whatever it turned out to be. And it would be difficult for those teachers to get common collaborative planning. Right now, we're pretty close to 100% in our high schools with common collaborative planning. If I'm in this SLC, we're pretty close to that. That's something that we achieved this year. So that would be one of the challenges, but we do feel like the entire SLC experience and the career-themed academies, we would be able to continue that and improve on that, which we plan to do every year anyway.
I am just so incredibly frustrated. I mean, we paid $800 and some odd thousand for a consultant to help us implement smaller learning communities and to align the scheduling. And I mean, I don't know. I'm very frustrated. And I look at, what's best for the students. And I have to. I'm not saying the budget's not important, and I'm not saying that staff is not important. But I will say that this board member is going to filter decisions through what is best for our students, and the cuts as far away from the classroom as possible.
And I'm also concerned that this is. I'm with Dr. Todd on this, and I'm concerned that the approach to staff is not, is this a good decision? It's, we have to save X amount of millions of dollars, figure out a way that we can do this so we can save the money. And that's troubling to me. And I agree with Carol. Yes, $39 million is a lot of money, and we can't pluck it out of the air. There are no more one-time hits. There are very few peripherals that we can decrease. But I mean, Venice, just as you said, Lori, Venice and Booker have been on block scheduling for a very, very long time. And I am concerned about those schools, especially with their elective art programs and their academies. This troubles me greatly.
I think what I believe is being presented to us today is something for us to look at. And this is not a final that says that we are going to do this, but rather this is one of the options that we have. And we don't have to really vote on anything until January or February, which I realize is right around the corner. But I think if we can find the way to reduce the necessary funds, whether we like it or not, I like block scheduling, I always have. I've been a proponent of it. But I also understand that we're under a hard rock or whatever the heck it is. Right now,
I think it's between the rock.
Between the rock and the hard place.
Right, that's it.
Right.
But I also think that it's just an option right now. And if we do decide to go that way, we need to give staff as much time as possible. I was talking to Steve earlier about that young lady who came before us regarding the block scheduling and language, and they were already working on that. And Steve spoke to her last night regarding this. So if that's the way we're going to go, we need to give as much time as we can so that maybe even in January we can offer a language class. I don't know. Steve, could you share? If you mind?
Yeah, there's going to be many situations that will occur when you make a schedule change of this magnitude, where we would have to look at each individual child and try to make a decision that would support what they need to for their career, college or career choices. So, but that's what guidance counselor was telling Ms. Zucker. That's what guidance counselors do, and that's what administrators do. And we look at each individual child, and we do that during the school year. I'm confident we could solve that student's problem. The mother's here today, by the way, and she and I did talk last night, and I tried to reassure her last night that we're going to find a way to make this happen. We have a lot of resources in this district, and we have a lot of people committed to supporting those students. But we will come across instances where students have put off a course, and we will have to find a way to make that happen for them.
But we also have to keep in mind we have cut all electives from summer school. So while a student might have an option in the past to take electives during the summer, they no longer have that option.
That's correct.
So we have eliminated an option for these students, and so I'm really concerned that the solution is going to be, well, you can go to USF or MCC or take it somewhere else, and for me that's not a solution.
Well, one of the solutions could be that we would take it at one of our other high schools, but one of the solutions might be we still have second semester where we could offer a Spanish 1 course, and I think that's what the student needed to pick up Spanish 2 next semester.
We're encouraging our guidance counselors to have them do that, so that there is the if that comes to fruition, whatever the decision is, that doesn't create a hardship for those students. So we are asking our guidance counselors to work with students to not put off something that they could not take in their senior year and that is required for either their college-ready transcript or their graduation.
Carol?
My comments are not going to be well received by some in this room, but I feel compelled that I must say them. I have taught public school in Florida for 10 years. I taught night school in a jail. I taught summer school. I tutored, and I did whatever I needed to do to support myself. So I don't know if there's anyone sitting around this table that shares those same experiences as a board member that I shared. So I certainly understand the plight of teachers and understand the plight of teachers who try to support themselves and their families, because I have been there. However, I also understand that we negotiated many dollars and many percentages over the last 4 years into our budget. And as I begin to look at where we need to make cuts, I believe that we need to have the support of our collective bargaining unit in helping us to make those cuts as far away from the classroom as possible. Again, the comments are not popular, I'm sure. They may not be well received, but at the same time, I truly believe that these cuts need to come as far away from the classroom as possible. And we were very magnanimous in putting those dollars into teachers' salaries with the additional 30 minutes and all the percentages that went in over the last 4 years. So again, I would encourage our collective bargaining unit to begin to work with this board and to begin to help us to make decisions so that those decisions are as far away from the classroom as possible, because that's why this board member sits on the board.
And if I can add one more thing about the 71 people that are possibilities of being laid off, that might make the conversation about catastrophic policies irrelevant, because who are we going to be laying off? We're going to be laying off people with least seniority, people probably with younger children, because those are the people last on board in the school district. And in this economy, laying off 71 people with no jobs, to me, is it's a human element that, it's, I know it's $5 million, but it's 71 people's lives. And this has ramifications way beyond the $5 million. So that's me.
I'm sorry, but I don't think there's any one of us that sits on this board that does not want to put children first. I believe that's why we're all here. So I don't think you stand alone in that. I believe we all put children first. And sometimes we might have a difference of opinion of how to make those cuts, but in the bottom line is, of all of my time that I've been on the board, it's always been as far away from the classroom as possible.
Again, I say that for this board member, I speak for myself. I do not speak for anyone else. And again, I do request that our collective bargaining unit work with us to help us keep those cuts away from the classroom.
Anything? I mean, we've all read this, and I think this is one of those issues that, I'm sorry, Frank. Well, it's. I think everybody's very passionate about the issues here, and this is not. We're coming to what Lori said a couple of months ago, decisions that are not easy to make. And as we get to transportation and technology and all those things, they're just going to get more and more difficult as we basically have reduced funds between enrollment and the state. So, Frank. I didn't know if you actually wanted to say. I can tell. He leans back and forth. I'm not even sure if he wants to talk.
From what Dr. Todd just said, I mean, I think to go to the collective bargaining unit to solve the problem that, in my opinion, has caused a good part of this. I mean, that's where our money goes. And they have decided that more money is more important than more employees. And, I mean, that's just the reality. I mean, that's just where we are, and we're not going to be able to go there. And I think I appreciate your bringing that up, but that's.
I agree with you, and that was an indication last year.
I'm not sure that I agree with her. I don't know that it's fair to point the fingers at somebody who's doing their job, but I do agree that and would hope that your committee is getting input from the bargaining units that would be representing these teachers, because I don't want to make these decisions in a vacuum. I want to know, yes, where does the union representatives or the teacher representative stand on an issue like this, but more than just the teachers in general, what about the teachers at these schools, and what about the students that will be affected by this? I mean, at some point, if we're going forward, I mean, I would like to hear back some feedback from the community on where we are, because I remember coming on the board and all the brouhaha that was going over when we were forcing Sarasota High to go to a block schedule. I mean, I don't want that kind of a kickback. I mean, I would like them to be somewhat involved, so perhaps maybe as a preliminary, I mean, we finish up with the discussion so they know what's on the table, they understand why we're doing it, and then we can get some feedback from both the staff involved and the students involved.
And I can, part of the rationale for having these types of proposals come early is that there is time for that type of feedback, and you're going to hear both sides. I can tell you, even at schools that are newly into the block, schools that have been in the block for a while, both from students and staff, there are different opinions, and frankly, we've found through our experience some courses lend themselves to the block, some don't, some teaching styles lend themselves to the block. So it is a mixed, debatable topic in terms of that type of schedule, and certainly teachers, when they have significant reduction in planning time, that has an impact that they understand. So there is going to be a variety of feedback, which we agree needs to be part of this whole process. Nobody's pushing for a decision at this point. But I can tell you, I've told staff, and I'm out there every week talking to staff to help them understand the situation that we're in, and the gravity of it, and the significance of where it is a triple whammy. I talk to them in terms of we've never seen this considerable reduction in state revenues. You have at the same time declining enrollment, though that's new territory where we don't have growth to try to soften this. And finally, the class size, that where it used to be the debate with the school board was, do we put an additional student in that allocation process? You no longer have that flexibility. That really restricts options. And certainly negotiations will be a part of this, and we have agreed that we will look at supplements early. That is a negotiated item, so there is collaboration on some negotiated issues. But I've told everyone there will be no sacred cows, that we will review every possible proposal. This is something that districts across the state were looking at last year. Some chose to implement, and frankly, that's helped us, because one of the unanticipated expenses some districts incurred was the textbook piece, so we know we have to build that in. We've talked with those school districts to understand it, so that my responsibility to you is to bring you all possible proposals and to give you enough time to receive that feedback so that you can make the best decisions, that we together can make those decisions and how we're going to move forward.
But my point is I don't want to receive that feedback in a vacuum over my internet, or my email from a bunch of people. I mean, I would like to be able to have a public discussion at each of the high schools where the teachers can talk, or the students can, and so that they can hear both sides of it, because it gets very difficult when it's just all of those people contacting one board member and we're hearing it in a vacuum, rather than, because I think that's one of the things that some of the population gets frustrated, because they don't have a back and forth dialogue on it.
And certainly we can talk about ways to help that to happen. The problem, too, even in that single issues, when you have feedback on single issues, they're not also seeing the total problem. Just like you, in what I think is a wise decision, you want to see this in all, putting it all together when you see what is the transportation, so you're not looking at silos making that decision, and I think that serves you well. You'll get the feedback, though they won't know what are the other options. If we don't do this, then what might happen, so that they can begin to weigh those options. I will tell you, given the options that we have available to us, given class size that does restrict some options, and some options would require negotiations, which does delay that process. When you're looking at the significance of the shortfall, there will not be a whole lot of options. You can only go to certain places, and I'm not trying to be discouraging, but because I do believe strongly that this is a board that's looking thoughtfully at these decisions and will consider all feedback. But we will have very difficult decisions, because we wouldn't be asking you to consider this if we were not looking at this budget shortfall. I can tell you, getting all of our high schools on the same schedule was a huge plus in this district, where we didn't have kids going back and forth with different graduation requirements. It was a huge plus. I can tell you we wouldn't be coming here today if we weren't faced with the shortfall.
Is there any reason we can't begin working with our union representatives now instead of waiting until, March, April, May, when I don't want to make a decision in January about block scheduling when we have not even talked to the. I mean, to me, that's the cart before the horse. Let's start our negotiations and proposals to see what we can do now before the holiday break, so that when we approach January, we don't have, we have to do this because we don't know what's going to happen in May. I don't want to be in that position. So that would be my suggestion.
So in order to go to either 6th or 7th period, we have to negotiate that?
No, this proposal would not require negotiations. We can do this within the current contract.
But so what you're asking for really is you want to know where we are with negotiations, whether we are going to pay a raise. You want to know the bottom line.
Well, and we need to talk about, I think Carol and Frank, if I'm wrong, correct me, the 30 minutes, which is a 7.5% of salary, step increases for next year. I mean, if we have no money, we have no money.
Right.
So I think we can't go in blindly making decisions when we haven't talked to our union people about what they come back and tell us from their teachers, including the 71 teachers who may not be here the following year. I think that's unfair. I think we need the whole picture, and that includes our union people.
So there may be concessions that SCTA is willing to make with this board, and then some of these issues may be moot issues.
Well, we have opened and will be opening the discussion on supplements, so I think there is now much earlier discussions than previous on negotiated items. So we have a committee ready to look at some of those recommendations that can certainly help in this situation.
If I recall, 1% is $5 million. Is that correct?
I think it's $2 million. $2 million something.
1% is how much in terms?
$3 million. $3 million now. $3 million. Okay.
Okay. So that's something.
But going back to that, Lori, the numbers that we're talking about with our budget shortfall is recognizing no salary increase.
Has no salary increase.
Right.
Does have step.
So, but I'm hoping that everybody realizes that we do have a budget problem, because people don't, because we have money in reserves. The attitude has been for the last several years, we have no problem. And we have spent money that we simply could not afford to spend, and we can't keep doing it.
Well, I'm going to put the 30 minutes back on the table again, and it may not be popular, but that was presented to this board, and Mr. Widener helped me out, but I believe it's $6 million a year.
It's 15, isn't it?
No. What was presented to the board as how much it was going to cost?
That was the original.
The original was $6 million, and it's now up to $15 million a year. Ballpark.
13 and a half, somewhere in that. I don't have the exact number, but somewhere in those numbers.
So again, the board was asked to make a decision based on erroneous information. And so I'm going to put it back on the table again, and it may not be popular, but if it was presented at $6 million a year, it is now more than double what it was presented. That's a huge reoccurring cost to this district.
And that's a negotiated item, which is why I was saying we need to begin talking. I mean, supplements, Lori, what are we talking? Supplements, even if we decrease, we're not even talking $1 million. If we decrease supplements.
Now, why don't you come up here?
Frank?
Well, I'll comment. One thing that I would like, because I have had a hard time over the last several years getting a handle on it, is quite simply the extra $55 or $60 million we get for the 1 mil voted referendum. Exactly where do we differ from a Manatee County with the $60 million more? Where is that $60 million going to what we would have as a district without it and to what we have with it? And I think that that might shed some light on where the money's going.
Well, certainly that was part of the last referendum, was the additional 30 minutes, which tied to that salary. So part of it, certainly, the majority of it certainly is salary and benefits. In some cases, specific positions, additional guidance counselors, some additional arts programs, but it was also for teacher salary increases.
I'd like to throw something else out here. If we were to go to 7 periods, the state only requires 24 credits for graduation.
Correct.
If we had 7 periods, there was conceivably 28.
That's
could we
correct.
look at, not requiring 28 credits to graduate, just requiring
we
the
would
24?
Not. We typically what's done with the 7 period, just to make sure the kids don't decide at the senior year that they really don't need to stay that year, is we require 26 credits. So it's a slight increase. It does allow. The benefit to students in the 7 period day is they can take more electives. So those majors, those career technical programs, they have more flexibility that allows them to take it. The 6 period day keeps you to a fairly limited number of electives, and so it begins to be more difficult to complete those CTE programs in major areas of interest.
Well, when I went to school, way back when, we had some students, and I know it was here too. They'd take summer courses back when you could. Where we had students that would graduate, before right around the spring break at the half year, and then go on to college, or would leave and get their diploma and then go to work, or would work half time in their senior year.
We have those
do we have to
now.
have all students now going 28?
No, in fact, there's allowance for early graduation, which they can even have a fewer number of credits required. So there are those alternatives, and some students it's a very good deal for our seniors to keep them in the coursework. We find they're better prepared for post-secondary. They can also get college credit at far less expensive than it will be once they
college
graduate.
Credit is very cheap.
Many of our students do either have early entrance, where we can still help with their payment for college credit. So there are some benefits, and so we have lots of examples of that. I don't know if Al wanted to answer the question just in terms of the supplement
I forgot what
piece.
the question was.
It was supplement.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Yep. The total dollar amount you spend right now is $6 million on supplements. Now, we did negotiate that effective July 1 next year. Supplements go down by 7.1%. So that will save about $400,000 off that. But I've already got that projected in my disaster plan, I guess I'd call it, for next year. So.
So it's less than $500,000. So that.
But we're looking at further reductions that are being discussed at this point beyond that. So it's certainly worthy. It's not going to. None of these proposals are going to do it all. It's going to take multiple budget reductions, savings from this year, and legislative flexibility for us to make up the difference of the shortfall that we're projecting.
Question, Dow, if I may. When we went to the public for the 2006 referendum, we projected 30 minutes was going to cost $6 million. We now know that it's costing $12 million. We projected that we would have revenue from the 1 mil referendum at $60 million, someplace around in there.
It reached a maximum of $60 million, but this year it's about $53 million.
Okay, so we made we made promises based on projections, and we're not receiving we're not receiving the dollars that we expected to receive because of the housing market and other, the economy. And at the same time, our projections of what the expenditures were not correct projections. So, it's certainly a train that's crashing, but I think that our public would understand, that if we made different decisions based on correct and current information, that we're not reneging on any referendum promise at all, but information was not correct or revenues are not being received. I can't imagine that our public would not understand that, and we are trying to live within our budget and using our referendum dollars in a very efficient manner.
But when we're talking about, reducing the dollars, and the dollars weren't, correctly estimated and what it was going to cost, but then we talk about making the cuts as far away from the classroom as possible. That half hour is a half hour of learning time. We would be cutting learning time from those students at a time now when we've got more things pulling our elementary and middle school kids away from the classrooms. Like, we have to have a half hour per day for PE. So we've already limited their time for learning, and I don't think I don't want to belabor the point because I guess that's not what we're here for, is cutting that half hour, but that is definitely a half hour of education time that we're cutting. It's not just the dollars. When we're talking about keeping the cuts as far away from the classroom as possible, that cut is directly in the classroom. It is not just salary cuts. Those are definitely classroom time.
And I would argue, having taught in the classroom, that when we now look at additional passing time for students, that certainly that has an impact and does cut into the instructional time. And I'm not sure that I fully believe that the 30 minutes. I'll withhold the rest of my comment.
Frank?
I've heard a couple people just talk about how frustrated they are because we have to cut because the referendum's only bringing in $53 million this year. And I guarantee you that there isn't a person in this room in 2002 that would have ever thought that the referendum would raise $60 million a year, much less $53 million a year. So I don't think the problem is, again, what's happened with our property values here. I think it's what's happened to our property values over the last 3 or 4 years and the way that governments went crazy with the spending. I think it's just time that we have to just, like I said last workshop, this isn't going to change this year. It's not going to change next year or the year after. We need to get our budget to where we can not only afford it this year, but afford it the year after that and the year after that. So I think this is the year we have to cut the things that we probably never should have put in the first place, only because property values went completely irrational for a couple of years. We kind of made it just to where it's the norm, and it never should have been the norm and never should have happened. So I think we need to make the hard cuts now, because it's going to be the same way next year and the year after before we ever see a mill raising what a mill raised last year or this year.
And that's why I think we really need to start negotiations, because that is not something this board can cut. We cannot unilaterally cut 30 minutes or 7.5% from salary ourselves. We do not have any authority to do that. So that's why I think it's important early, before the holidays, to sit down and just what Shirley was talking about, the high schools, but rather do that amongst ourselves and say, well, how can you help us in this area? How can you help us? The picture. We need a win-win for everybody here. Not, and I agree. I don't want to see our students lose. I don't think anybody does. So.
And I would like to see that happen soon before Carol and I have to read about ourselves in the bottom line too many times in the next several months.
Is that okay? Any other questions on the proposal?
Did he finish his presentation?
Hey, this is
at
the pleasure of the board.
Right,
It's just to give you the information.
I'd like to ask one question. Probably a simple answer. How can we have a 7-period schedule and say $5 million and a 6-period with only $4 million?
That's a great question, and because everybody looks at it, will ask that same question, and I think Al asked me that same question just the other day. What it boiled down to, and we ran the figures several times because the first time we did it surprised me too, and then we ran it by some other folks in other districts, and it's an accurate statement. When teachers are teaching 5 out of 6 periods, in a 6-period day. They're only covering 5 sections. When they're teaching 6 out of 7, it's a more efficient schedule. They're actually teaching 150 students in a 6-period day. They're teaching 150 students.
They need less teachers.
In a 7-period day, they're teaching 150 students. In a 6-period day, it's 125. So there's 25 students that have to be made
So
up.
it takes fewer people if you're distributing this group of kids across these adults.
That's the 55 and the 71. That's the reflection. Right?
Yes.
Okay.
So what's next period day?
More
The
minutes
block
than what we
schedule.
have.
That's the block schedule.
Yeah,
Before we
yeah.
leave the block scheduling, because all we've really talked about is what the cost of block scheduling is. I know I got many, many calls and emails from students, particularly at Riverview, a few years ago when we were implementing, and I've still heard a lot of students that weren't really happy about it. What's been the, I mean, are they, for the most part, really happy about block scheduling?
You're going to find it's mixed. I think they've looked at the AB as being something that spreads across over a year's time, but that for some students is a very difficult schedule. I've had a good conversation with Tom Marshall at Venice High School teaching economics. He says some kids are fine with that, knowing what day it is and where you're supposed to go first period, and remembering what you did 2 days ago in that period. And for some students, that lower 25%, they show up and he says wrong day and they don't have their books. And, it is very mixed. There are pros and cons with any schedule. There is not a perfect schedule. So there are definitely pros and cons, and you're going to hear that in terms of some of the feedback.
Well, that's what I kind of thought, because we're trying to make it a totally financial decision, but I haven't heard a lot. I've heard a lot of mixed reviews, a lot of mixed responses to both, and not just from us students, teachers as well.
Right.
Some teachers liked it, and some really dislike it.
And I would say, along those lines, that my experience in working in a block-scheduled school and working in a 7-period day and a 6-period day, typically there's even the AB schedule. That's every class is on an AB in every school in a district. We have one district in Florida that does that, and you could never get the teachers to say they'd want to leave that. It's what they're used to doing.
Exactly.
They get comfortable with.
Exactly.
They've learned how to teach on that, and so you have to kind of change that culture when you move to a new schedule. And that's one of the implications we would have here. If we were going to move to a 7-period day, we'd have to look at Northport, Venice, Booker, that's been on the block for a long time, and we'd have to make sure they were the professional development was there, the training, the support was there to allow them to be effective going back from a block to a 50 or a 60-minute day.
And that there are dollars attached to that as well.
That's what I was thinking.
So I mean, it's not a just textbook situation. I remember when Venice went to block scheduling, and there was an uproar and horror stories, and that was for the first 3 years. And if you talk to most of the, just like Lori said, most of the teachers are fine with it, and most of the students, and there'll always be students, either way, but. It is culture and it is habit, and
it does. The block does create some challenges with the when you look at the FCAT testing and trying to make sure that students are being served in math and English in reading courses as they head into the testing. If you think about a student that might be in an English 1 course and they're being served reading through that English 1 course. They may end the first semester in early January and then take the test in March. That's been one of the real challenges people have faced over the years with the block schedule. Typically what the schools have done is they've doubled the English, they've doubled the math, which is really getting our students super prepared. Their electives become academic electives. But we found ways to adjust, but there are pros and cons with both schedules, even with the FCAT testing.
Thanks.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Well, we have our high school administrator here, executive director. Can I ask you a question? I save all my newspaper clippings. There was an editorial letter to the editor about the lunchrooms in high schools, and
I talked to the principal.
That's not the case. Say it isn't so.
Unequivocally, it isn't so. I'm sure there are days when we have worse days than others with high school students. The wind's blowing. It's an outdoor cafeteria. I've lived it and breathed it, and I've walked in and say, what happened here? But
It's an outdoor cafeteria?
Some are and some
Oh.
aren't. But I've had a discussion with that principal. I got up that morning, saw that same letter to the editor, and we had a good discussion about it. And his response was, Steve, that's an area that we've worked very hard in. It's much improved than what it used to be. And the interesting thing was, it was a person they invited in from the community that supports the students there. It wasn't a parent, and it wasn't so. He was a little taken aback by it, but at the same time, he feels like they've made great progress in it.
More help in our schools by the community is always welcomed, though,
Absolutely.
isn't it?
Of course it is.
Okay. We're going to have Bob Hansen and Leona Campos going to give you an update in terms of some of our technology.
Excuse me, where's Mike Horan?
Mr. Horan, is our third musketeer, is unable to join us today. He's had partial knee replacement surgery.
They just won't be. This just won't be the same without Mike.
Well,
It just
I'm
won't. You're
sure
correct.
you would prefer being here than
I
being...
didn't say that was a good thing. I just said it wanted to be the same.
I don't know, give a knee replacement or
a school
Yeah,
board
I
workshop.
don't envy him, although getting past it will be good for him, because bone-on-bone is not good either. For the record, my name is Bob Hansen, and I have the distinct pleasure of serving as your Chief Information Officer for the school district as well as for the county government. Just one example of the strong partnerships that we've been able to create so far in looking to save money. I am joined by Leona Campos, who directs the IS side of the operations, and as we've touched on, Mike, who directs the IT side of the operations, is not able to join us. I'm conscious of your time. I don't have a lot of prepared remarks, but I'm very open to your questions. We are both very open to your questions. I would like to say that given the conversation that we just had, I'm very pleased to be able to say that we're not bringing anything but savings to the table over what has been planned in the past. And I'm proud of the IT group's ingenuity over the past couple of years in that we've been able to bring to you numerous savings opportunities, some of which are challenging because they carry cultural change with them. But we have led the way in many ways on saving and not filling positions, for example, and reusing positions in a way that provides a service that we're able to automate something else. So we're very focused on productivity, and as a matter of fact, the only investments that we will bring to you over the coming year, and maybe even several weeks, will be substantial savings over that which we had planned in the 5-year plan. The 5-year plan that you recognize before you, with thanks to Dr. Todd for her comments last year, we have color-coded it, so you can see what happened last year, what happened this year, and where we're planning on going next year. And we're very open to those questions. If we, like I say, when we bring anything to you, we've got really 2 major areas of investment focused on for the coming year. One will be to continue to replace outdated computer equipment. And when we bring that to you, if we bring that to you, it will be at a substantial savings to the previous plan. Basically the same plan, but at a much lower cost, and in a way that will free additional staff so that we can utilize them to deliver higher level services. Likewise, finally, after 2 years of significant district investment, we will be bringing you a replacement proposal for our AS400 system, our 35-plus-year-old architecture. The proposal we'll be bringing to you will be substantially less than the monies that you have budgeted, more than $3 million less than what we have budgeted, and that amount we budgeted was already significantly less than what the market rate would be for a replacement of this nature. Just to put some perspective around that, a project that replaces the student side of systems, the HR side of systems, and the finance side of systems for a district this size would be in the $20 to $25 million range. By partnering with a company, our current provider, to develop the latest generation of technology and design a system to our needs, we've been able to get that down to about $11.5 million. As a matter of perspective, Miami-Dade, obviously a much larger district, signed just a agreement just for HR and financial systems replacement that was $82 million. And so I'm very proud of our group. I'm very proud of the district staff in IT, beyond IT, for the work that they've done to define that opportunity for us and create that opportunity for us.
Could you repeat what you said was the expected cost versus what we're paying?
For a district our size, typically, if you looked at it and averaged it out, it'd be 20 to 25 million. And there's an important qualifier I'd like to put on that. That 20 to 25 million is based on products in the space today, available in the market space today. We've looked at those products. Those products are based on 80s technology. We have 70s, late 60s, 70s technology, basically mainframe technology. It went from there to client server. Most of the systems, actually all the systems that are available on the market today are client server technology. That is 80s technology. We are going to web technology, so we'll be current. In doing so, we're going to remove ourselves. We kind of put ourselves in a difficult position over the years on this software product in that we enhanced it ourselves. So we started making changes to software 20 years ago, and now are stuck in a position where we have 7 or more staff members required just to maintain the software that we changed and to maintain the things we've added to it. We all know our most favorite add-on was SmartWeb, and this would also be a replacement for SmartWeb and Tag and Tracker and all sorts of things that go along with that. So we'll finally remove the baling wire and masking tape and get on a state-of-the-art system. And that's really the extent of my prepared remarks, so let me go to your questions.
The software that you're talking about takes 7 people to run now, so will the new system require less people?
Significantly less. We'll be able to redeploy those people to things that we haven't been able to do as well as we'd like today, and in some cases we have already anticipated the new software in that, for example, our staff is choosing to retire in some cases, and we have not replaced them. It's important to note that, for example, our senior HR person, we did not replace her when she retired. Our senior finance and student person is retiring this year, and we have tentative plans not to replace that position. That depends on our investment decisions here, obviously. There is no free alternative.
It's my understanding that we have budgeted $15 million. You talk about 20 or 25 million. We have $15 million budgeted over 2 years.
Right.
So you're saying now that it's going to come in at 11.5.
Yes, ma'am. Or less.
So that's a savings of $4 million. Wow. Okay. Shirley?
When you're talking about the cost of $11 million, is that just putting the system in, the cost of those employees and the hardware? Have you figured in the cost of the actual usage of the teachers and whatnot getting onto the smart web and loading that data in? Are those part of your cost savings, or will those be additional cost savings that you can't really get your hands around?
They would go beyond that. Our HR processes are antiquated. They've stayed with the system. We have a very paper-intensive process. Productivity gains that the country experienced over the last 20 years, we really haven't. This will enable us to get those gains. We can't target them in advance with any specificity, but we anticipate that it will enable us as a district to maintain our low administrative cost percentage. If we don't do some of these things, we're going to have to start adding people just to process paper. There are numerous reasons for doing and benefits to doing the system. We'll bring those to the table here. We will bring the voice of the cabinet to the table in terms of those benefits as well. Dr. Todd, you raised a recent one. Our ability to forecast information with any accuracy in our existing world is severely constrained. This would give us the ability to do those kind of what-if analyses on the fly.
So in doing this, we're going to get out of the code writing business. I mean,
yes, ma'am.
We've been there for a long time, and I have my second new phone in 6 months, and the last phone that I bought in June, and it wasn't working the way I wanted it to work, and I found out because I had missed 2 automatic updates. So going to the new system, then these updates, because it's web-based, they will just so we're not responsible. Am I on the right track?
Yes, ma'am. You're completely correct, and that's it's even more interesting. Our current situation is that we're kind of paying for a service to do the changes, but we have to look at what they changed and then apply it ourselves. So we're paying twice today, and in the future we'll leverage that service from the vendor.
Perfect.
So if it's going to cost us 11.5, is that for the software?
It's 11.5 includes the software, the services, and the infrastructure or computers.
So that means implementation?
And yes,
that includes
services.
11.5 includes implementation?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
And we've built in some contingents in there as well. You'll see in the agreements that we have a stack of paper now developed that's about 3 inches thick. It encompasses the design work that we've co-done with the vendor, the agreements that define the relationship, and we've also built in some contingency so that we don't have to come back before you and deal with the surprises. Oh, by the ways, that's not our nature.
I'm assuming that the maintenance cost then is going to be much lower than what it is what we're paying now.
Well, that's an interesting question. It depends on your definition of maintenance. Our staff costs will be significantly lower. Those spent. And we have, like I say, 7 people right now who are dedicated to it. That's a very expensive. It's more than $500,000 a year in expense right there. The definition of maintenance in a software license term, though, is a percentage of the acquisition costs, and that will see an increase. And so the contract that we'll bring before you will carry with it a maintenance cost increase. That's the price we pay the vendor to do the work that we're doing today.
But it's more than offset by the reduction in staff time.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Can I add something, please? One thing I did want to add was over the course of the last year, we got together with many different folks in the district. This was not an IT designed project. We brought in our registrars, our schedulers, our teachers, our finance folk, our HR folk to really come down and talk about what it is that we want in the system. And we had several workshops, brought these folks down, brought our expert teachers who knew every grade book under the sun, and something near and dear to my heart from the teaching world as well. And there was a lot of excitement generated to get rid of the green screen, to go through that process, to have a district-wide grade book, which does not exist right now today, was a big piece of that as well.
At all grade levels.
Yes, at all grade levels.
So from my perspective, that is the key thing that we have to go for. With the challenges that we have financially, we really need to reintegrate and strengthen the relationship of the parent with the educational process. And this gives us that parent portal and gives us that parent communication link to help offset some of the other challenges we face.
I thought that was one of the pieces that we had purchased previously, and it didn't work.
I wish we had. No, this strategy that was embraced by the board 4 years ago.
SmartWeb.
Yes, SmartWeb. That was basically a Band-Aid added on to the 30-year-old system. That is also a major compelling reason for us to change. That software, the relationship it has as an add-on, has failed 50% of the time when it comes to grading. We've ended up on Channel 10. We've ended up nearly sending out false or bad transcripts. It's a high-risk area. The state of the current application is a very high-risk area.
One of the things that I would like to see is something that the business department does. The business department has been able to give us quantitative measurements on qualitative information, and I was kind of disappointed when I saw this report because there's none of that in here.
Okay, do you have an example, ma'am? From the business department, I can.
From the business.
Yeah, I can connect with.
I'm talking about Scott Limpy and what he's done with his plan.
That I understand.
I don't have the book in front of me, but I'm talking in overall. Yeah. I'm not talking specific. Because there are no. You don't tell us how anything. You don't tell me how ConnectEd is working, what the cost it is. There's no how things are working and what the cost is. Are we getting the best bang for our buck? Right, okay. The best way to say it.
Well, where we can do that, we've tried to do that.
I didn't see any of that.
The network, the example I shared with you recently was a good example of that. Some of the things that, and we will bring you quantified dollar cost issues when we bring the contract forward and everything is finalized for your approval. There will certainly be quantifiable dollars there as well, but some of it is very, frankly, subjective. We can't anticipate the improvements in process in HR will yield X people specifically. And actually, Scott struggled with the same challenge when we were going down a path on a timekeeping software package for $600,000 that was supposed to yield savings. it was hard to quantify those savings. They were forecasted amounts. But wherever you have that desire, I'd be happy to do my best to quantify that. For example, I know that I've had conversations with Mr. Widener recently, and why are we sharing a data center facility? Is that quantifiably beneficial, for example? And we can easily do that one.
Right.
And he
that
has requested that one.
is a question of mine.
Right.
Absolutely
Yep.
is a question of mine. Why we are paying so much money to house our servers in another location, and a location that I understand is not hurricane-proof.
Yes,
So
it's-
why are we doing that when we can house our servers here and save like $51,000 or even more than that a year?
And we will bring that. I mean, if that's your request,
It's my request.
we can bring
It has
that
to
to
be
you very
your
easily.
funds.
Our community, just to address it on the surface, our community was very fortunate to be able to make lemonade out of a lemon when Arthur Anderson went through its meltdown here. Our community acquired that data center that we're in for 10 cents on the dollar. Now, that's a substantial savings. The facility itself would cost $8 to $10 million to rebuild, and that's not even equipping it with computers. The sharing that as a community, as opposed to rebuilding multiple ones, has a significant gain to it. That facility is 24/7, 365, monitored, staffed, and has redundant power. But we don't have any of that here, and it is hurricane resistant to a 3.
Hurricane-resistant, but not right.
Well, to a Category 3. Well, nothing is hurricane
We have,
proof.
we have Wilkinson. I mean,
That's
there
a
are
3 as well, ma'am.
places.
That is a 3 as well. Yes.
But we couldn't monitor that 24/7, 365.
Not for 51,000.
Nor do we have
No,
all the
no,
infrastructure
yeah.
necessary to do it there.
You'd have to, a whole salary would be given just for that, and that doesn't even
Yes,
equate.
and the poor person would not be able to go home.
Yeah, really. You'd have to hire at least 2 or 3 people then to do the same thing.
That is correct. But and you're right.
I still think we need to look at it.
And Mr. Widener did me the favor of saying I should quantify that before we bring any more of those agreements to you, so you understand the details specifically. But the cost of building those facilities is enormous, and we are presently evaluating a solution that will bring us a hurricane Category 5 hurricane resistant. Again, nothing's proof. Facility that we can share together in a center of the state location. So we'll be able to consider that option as we go forward as well.
And do you think that the county will any day soon be E-rated so that we'll be able to save, I understand it's $250,000 a year.
We have drafted the application again, okay, and I'm optimistic that the obstacles have been reduced. One of the key challenges that we've faced is dealing with the person who is involved in approving is the person who provides the existing service from the state. That has some tangled angles to it. The cost increases and the challenges that the state is now facing from a financial perspective, and they're passing our way, will increase the cost of the existing service past that which we can provide locally at a far better level. They're aware of that now. We've had that conversation. We sat down for the 3rd time at the FADES conference recently with the person in charge, and it was her idea to do this proposal this way. So I am optimistic that we'll get E-rate, yes, which will further slice the cost that we pay for our network.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Now, be aware, though, that the federal government is also evaluating the continuation of E-rate. It's been under siege for some time because of communities that have been fraudulent in the way they used it.
I just have, if you don't mind, bear with me. I have one more question on the active boards. What is the maintenance cost on the active boards, and is that included in all of the school budgets? Or is it included in a line account? Because I understand some of them have to be retrofitted to use with laptops, so what will that entire cost be?
We have a maintenance contract with Logical Choice. Okay. It's a small amount, relatively small amount, considering the acquisition cost of the boards, and that is in Mike's budget, Mr. Horan's budget. That is not the maintenance costs of an active board, however. When we added all of that technology, and I'll remind you of conversations we've had in the past, we did not add staff. Okay, so now a significant amount of staff time is spent addressing active board-related issues. Okay, so we have not quantified that. The service desk that we put in place, this is exactly where I want to go with it. The service desk that we've put in place has given us the ability to quantify staff time and staff costs associated with maintaining our old stuff, which is really high, as well as some of our newer stuff. It also gives us the ability to fix things once and for all, whereas in the past we've just continued to throw staff at things. One of the
Not physically, though, just...
Well, yes, ma'am, right, yes. One of the most frequently occurring challenges we have with active boards surrounds cabling. Okay, simply knowing which cable to plug into which port. Over the course of the summer, now that we have staff available to do some of these projects over the summer, we're going to color code those so that it's an easier thing to acknowledge.
So the retrofitting for the, wait a minute, I have to understand this. So the retrofitting to use of the laptops is simply putting the cord in the right place?
Sometimes that is, but most often it's a driver issue. And some of our technology, I mentioned the computers, some of our computer-based technology, the computers themselves, is substantially dated. And we're really working forward to try and get that within, so that the computers we depend on the most are all within the 5-year cycle that the board endorsed in the strategy. And that's where we're working right now with HP to come up with a very creative way of getting us further down that path. But we have right now probably conservatively 100 different computer platforms in place. So some platforms work right out of the box, and others take more work, and that's that's a very situational thing.
I think I got Shirley, and then we'll go to Carol. Okay, okay.
My question will blend into what she was talking about, the technology service desk. How is that working? And are our teachers' concerns being met and resolved in a timely manner? We're
doing better and better all the time. We have the ability to measure that now, whereas in the past we haven't. We did expect and did understand the reasons for challenges at the beginning of the year. Every year for the past, since I've been involved anyway, easily, the first couple of weeks of school has been a technology nightmare. Again, that happened again, but this time we had data to track. So now we can know where the issues are and what our response time has been. Since the beginning of the year, we've tracked 28,000 service requests using the service desk, 28,000.
Wow.
If even 1%, is problematic, that's still 280 requests that you'll hear about, that were challenges for whatever reason. It's probably a couple of percent that we got through. It's also, also acknowledged we have the data now. That's very beneficial. For example, one of the other side effects of replacing our systems will be an HR system that automatically feeds our directory structures, automatically feeds our email systems, automatically populates our student systems. Whereas today, in the first 2 weeks alone, we had 3,000 requests solely related to those kind of issues, IDs. IDs. And that's something we shouldn't be doing at all. Our systems, right now they don't, but our systems, when a person puts in a student, it should flow to the systems that it needs, that information. No, today we spend staff time typing it in again. We move a student, then we do the same thing over and over again. So this is it gives us the basis of knowledge to fix the problem once and for all and get ourselves in a position where the things we have to react to are the exception rather than the norm. Please.
Did I hear you correctly that we have computers that are not compatible with active boards? Is that what I heard?
We've had driver issues on some devices. Yes.
A driver is held inside. A driver is housed in a.
It's a piece of software.
Right, but it's related to a computer.
Oh, absolutely. And actually, I can say with certainty we have computers that are not compatible with active boards because we still have 14-year-old Apples sitting around in some cases. We don't plug those in. We don't even try. But the teachers, which are the dominant device that connects to an active board, have the most recent equipment.
Our teachers do.
Yes, your teachers do.
Okay. You're assuring me all of our teachers who choose to use the active board can connect to the active board.
Yes, ma'am. I assure you of that.
Okay, thank you.
But that's some of the
because I was going back
to.
I guess one of the things that maybe I misheard. And one of the things I hear now with the new proposal is that everything that we do will talk to everything else that we do, which has been a problem in the past, that we forge ahead with an idea because it's a compelling idea, but it's not compatible. Mrs. Zucker, I'm sure you remember the days of Abacus. So, I look forward to where I don't even have to ask the question, is it compatible, that everything that we do is compatible. If you look at, data quality and electronically submitting data and all of, we do much more with data than what we do with the active boards and students' utilization of the technology. So thank you.
Yes, we're looking forward to that as well. Trust me, there's a whole lot of staff that is going to look forward to doing higher value-added things than retyping stuff that they shouldn't have to type.
Right.
I heard you say 100 platforms, and I have been under the impression since at least 2004 that we were reducing the number of platforms, and we were going to really try to only go with one.
And that is true. That is true. Depending on your definition of platform.
Moving down that.
Absolutely. And let's be specific about terms. We've standardized on a brand to date. Okay, HP. That's on a platform that varies depending on when we order the equipment. So we've been on a 5-year teacher cycle, replacing all the computers every 5 years for teachers. The computers we bought 5 years ago are not the ones we bought last year. So that's in itself. We have desktops and laptops for teachers in some cases. That in itself is 10 different potential platforms. Now we still have 28,000 computers that we have to go through and ascertain the value of them, because they're all consuming power, they're all consuming staff support time, and some of those go back literally 14 years. So that's where you get to the 100. I feel sorry for some of we've given our TSPs, our tech professionals, some serious challenges in supporting their schools, because they have to bounce from almost a generation to a generation on just the laptops and devices they work on.
But we are moving.
We are moving. Yes, your strategy is taking us down that path. Absolutely.
And we can give them cell phones, and they can communicate and use the web and Microsoft package. So computers might be obsolete as we speak.
Soon, yes, soon. But the platform itself has to also be conducive to education, as you're well aware. So, kind of hard to read a textbook on here.
Yeah.
I don't think you'll get this from this conversation, so I'd like to ask Lori. We are moving some of our technology dollars. We're not spending as much because of having a lower capital budget right now, so we're moving our expenses for technology out into the future as well. Is that not true?
Every area with the decrease in capital dollars took reductions, and so we also pushed out some, as you're aware, some of the projects that had been in our 5-year capital plan had to be pushed out. Technology also took a hit. We maintained, because of the future savings, we have kept in that 2-year budget dollars for the upgrade, the new software, because we think that will leverage future operational cost savings. But yes, technology took the hit everyone else did in our capital budget.
So you've left the $15 million in there over the next 2 years?
Yes.
Because that included in that $15 million now would be some computers or things like that.
Well, some for it's really just the infrastructure that's included on that.
You have a separate line item allocated for teacher replacement, computer replacement.
I know we did, but
and
we're
focusing on reducing that cost as well.
Okay.
Maintaining the value, but reducing the cost.
Because what I thought I heard you say is because the cost for the terms will be reduced, some of that money can then be used, and we don't have to move it around.
Overall, but I know where the confusion's coming. In December, we are looking at, can we, with any savings that we've been able to find any place in our capital budget, perhaps make a consideration. Remember the ability we had to apply property insurance to a capital budget, so it was really beyond just technology. It was looking at any savings that we may. It's one more way to save some significant dollars in this year's budget that could be applied for next year. We think we'll have that legislative flexibility again next year. So that's a consideration. We'll bring the details to the board. It's looking at the total capital budget, and that's what you'll be doing in December.
And Mrs. Zucker will be looking at it from the $15 million that we had planned over the 2 years for the returns replacement. There's also another line item for computer replacements, and we're hoping to project an additional savings there as well.
We will. We're not hoping. We will.
We have to. We have no choice.
Thank you again, and
thank you.
Thank you for almost always bringing us good news.
Well, we try.
Thank
you. One downside I've realized to our partnership, our holiday schedules aren't in sync.
Are you off today? Oh, sorry.
But he only gets a half day off.
Future collaboration possibilities.
Mr. Dubin's behind you. Take it up with him.
No, but it's only a quarter of your time for today.
We're at the other part. I know Shirley used up her others already, so she can.
Yeah, I did. I used up all my others.
I'm only teasing. Anything?
Oh, let's talk about Veterans Day.
Well, wait.
And
Carol
why our
has another,
students
and
are
then we'll get to that.
Yes, on our December Tuesday workshop, and I spoke with the superintendent, and unexpectedly I need to be out of town and would like to ask my colleagues if there's a possibility that we could move that to Monday rather than Tuesday.
Will you take us with you if we move it?
Of course,
Okay,
I will.
okay.
What was the question?
If we could move our Tuesday December workshop to Monday.
Just
I know
the
that
workshop,
just that
not the
one
meeting.
time, not the meeting, just the workshop. I know
I'll
there
let you know.
there are a number of media items, and I certainly would appreciate any accommodations that my colleagues could make.
It's the 8th of December. I can do that. Is that a problem?
Get a response.
You don't know. You don't have your calendar.
No, as much as grief as Dr. Todd is going to cause me from today's conversation. I'm not quite
I don't
sure.
know why we should do it then. Yeah.
Not fine.
Again, it would be very much
I don't think
appreciated.
it's a problem. I really
All right.
don't.
It's not a problem for me. Again, the
just
meeting
need to
will
look
stay
to
the
see.
same. The SIPs will stay the same for that Tuesday. We can't change those, but just the workshop, if we could move that to Monday. Just the workshop, okay? And then Dr. Todd will not be with us for the meeting of the night, but that'll stay. Yes, we can go over the times. That'll be fine.
And I'll check with Mr. Hardy about coming in by telephone. I've done that before, not with the new electronic system, but I certainly will check with him and with Mrs. Lane when she comes back.
And you can also check if there's anything critical. You may not need
Right.
to impose on yourself to do that.
Thank you.
All right, and Shirley wants to talk about Veterans Day. I believe that's you started that conversation to we did talk about what we were doing in schools, and there was something more.
Yeah, but we weren't on the air at the.
Actually, we were, but we weren't on. We were on the air, but the television cameras weren't on, which led us to think nobody was watching. But they were on.
So they were on, but they were getting a blank screen.
No, we were getting the blank screen.
Oh, okay, good.
Yeah, so we actually did cover that, and thank you for bringing that up again. Any other? No. Then we are adjourned.